Looking back now, I can see all the little mistakes, the tiny, almost insignificant decisions that led me right to that bridge. But when you're 24, full of the kind of self-assured ignorance only youth can provide, you don't think of consequences. You think of adventure, of conquering something, even if that something is just a particularly steep hiking trail on a Tuesday afternoon. I was living in Oak Haven then, a town so small it felt more like a whispered secret between the foothills and the winding river. My job at the local outfitter store barely paid the rent, but it kept me surrounded by everything I loved: maps, sturdy boots, and the smell of pine resin. Hiking wasn't just a hobby, it was my escape, my therapy. Every spare hour I was out there, exploring the network of trails that spiderwebbed through the dense wilderness of the Oak Haven Gorge. I knew those woods, or so I thought, like the back of my hand. I was a confident hiker, physically fit, and always prided myself on my preparedness until I was. It was late October, the kind of day where the air was crisp but the sun still had a surprising warmth, making the turning leaves blaze with impossible color. I remember specifically checking the time before I left the shop that day. 3:30. Plenty of daylight left, I reasoned. My shift had ended early and the urge to hit the trails was irresistible. My usual spot, the North Rim Trail, was always quiet on a weekday, perfect for clearing my head. No crowds, just the wind in the trees and the crunch of leaves underfoot. That was my first mistake, letting eagerness override caution. I usually aim to be back at my car by 5, giving me a comfortable buffer before dusk. But today, I just started walking. I hiked deeper than I normally would, enjoying the solitude. The air grew cooler as the sun dipped lower, casting long, dramatic shadows through the trees. That's when I noticed the shortcut. It wasn't marked on my map, not one of the official trails, but it looked well-trodden, a narrow path snaking down into a deeper part of the gorge. Curiosity, another common failing of the young and naive, got the better of me. It looked like it would loop back to the main trail, cutting off a good half hour. What's the harm? I remember thinking. That was my second mistake. The path descended sharply, leading me into a part of the gorge I hadn't explored before. The trees here were ancient, their branches so thick with moss they blocked out most of the sky. The air grew heavy, damp, and still, and the vibrant autumn colors faded into a muted palette of greens and browns. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way, but a strange quiet settled over the area. The usual forest sounds, chirping birds, rustling squirrels, were gone, replaced by a profound, almost eerie silence. It was the kind of quiet that makes your own heartbeat sound too loud. After about 20 minutes of navigating this less-than-ideal shortcut, the path opened up slightly, revealing a small, clear stream carving its way through the valley floor. Spanning the stream was a wooden footbridge. It was a simple structure, weathered planks, rope railings, nothing fancy. But what immediately caught my attention was its peculiar design. It was a single-level bridge, arched slightly, just wide enough for one person. Yet as I approached, I distinctly heard it. Thumpy, thumpy, thumpy. The sound of footsteps, rhythmic and heavy, thudding on wood, coming from above me. My head snapped up. I scanned the dense canopy, the sheer rock faces of the gorge walls, looking for what? A higher path, a second bridge. There was nothing. Just the solid, moss-covered rock walls rising steeply on either side and the thick, unbroken ceiling of tree branches far overhead. The sound was undeniably there, echoing in the strange silence of the gorge. Footsteps, distinct, moving across the invisible bridge above the one I was about to cross. It wasn't a trick of the wind or a branch falling. It was too regular, too intentional. And then, as quickly as they started, they stopped. The silence rushed back in, thicker and more profound than before, making the hairs on my arms stand up. I felt a prickle of unease, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I stood there frozen for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute or two. My breath hitched in my throat, a cold, dry lump of fear expanding with every beat of my heart. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn back, to scramble up that steep, unmarked path and find the familiar North Rim trail. But the path behind me now seemed impossibly steep, and the idea of retracing my steps, of acknowledging that I had made not just one or two, but a whole chain of errors, was almost as daunting as the strange quiet before me. My rational mind, the part that dealt with maps and weather patterns and proper gear, tried to find an explanation. A particularly agile squirrel, a trick of the acoustics in this strange enclosed space. No, the sound had been too distinct, too heavy, too human-like in its cadence. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't the light scurrying of an animal. It was deliberate, powerful, and utterly out of place. I forced myself to take a deep breath, trying to push down the rising panic. "It's nothing," I whispered, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. "Just the wind or a branch settling." Even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. There was no wind down here, not a whisper. The air was dead still. My eyes meticulously scanned the bridge again, then the rock faces, the canopy. Nothing, just the dark, weathered wood spanning the narrow stream and the solid, unyielding gorge walls. The rope railings, frayed in places, swayed almost imperceptibly in the absence of any breeze. I took a tentative step forward, my boots crunching on the fallen leaves near the bank. The stream gurgled softly beneath the bridge, the only natural sound in an otherwise unnaturally quiet world. I reached the edge of the bridge, my hand hovering over the rough rope railing. The wood looked old, but sturdy enough. It was a simple, functional structure. Yet the memory of those phantom footsteps made my skin crawl. What was above? What could have made that sound? The logical part of me insisted it had to be a higher ledge, a hidden path I couldn't see. But the primal, fear-driven part of me whispered of something else, something not of this world, or at least not of my world. With a determination born more of stubbornness than courage, I stepped onto the first plank. It groaned softly under my weight, a sound that seemed to echo disproportionately loud in the stillness. I moved slowly, deliberately, my senses on high alert. Every creak of the wood, every rustle of an unseen leaf made me flinch. I kept my head angled upwards, peering into the thick canopy, scanning for any sign of movement, any hint of another pathway. But there was nothing but the dense, ancient trees, their moss-draped branches forming a nearly impenetrable ceiling. Halfway across, I paused, my heart hammering against my ribs. I closed my eyes for a second, straining to hear anything, a bird, a distant animal cry, anything to break the suffocating quiet. But there was only the gurgle of the stream below and the frantic thump-thump-thump of my own pulse in my ears. The silence was the worst part. It felt less like an absence of sound and more like a presence, a heavy blanket pressing down, listening. I opened my eyes, scanning the opposite bank. The shortcut continued, a faint indentation in the undergrowth leading deeper into the gorge. There was no sign of it looping back to my familiar trails. The realization hit me then, this wasn't just a shortcut, it was a path into the unknown. And the unknown, I was quickly learning, was far more unsettling than any challenging terrain I had ever faced. I finally reached the other side, stepping off the bridge with a profound sense of relief. The ground felt solid, reassuring, but the unease didn't dissipate, it clung to me, a cold shadow. I glanced back at the bridge, a mundane structure now imbued with an unsettling mystery. What had I heard, and why was there nothing to explain it? Taking another shaky breath, I forced myself to move forward. Turning back now felt like admitting defeat, like letting fear win. And besides, maybe the path would loop around soon, just as I'd hoped. Maybe if I just kept going, I'd find a familiar landmark, a signpost, anything to tether me back to the reality I knew. The path on this side of the stream was even less defined than before, winding through increasingly dense undergrowth. The trees here seemed to grow closer together, their roots gnarled and exposed, creating treacherous tripping hazards. The air grew colder, and a damp, earthy smell, distinct from the fresh pine of the upper trails, filled my nostrils. It was the smell of ancient earth, of deep shade and slow decay. As I pushed deeper, the light began to fade rapidly, far faster than it should have for the time of day. The thick canopy above, coupled with the steep walls of the gorge, created a perpetual twilight. The vibrant autumn colors I'd enjoyed earlier were long gone, replaced by a monochrome world of muted greens, browns, and grays. My internal clock, usually so reliable, started to feel skewed. Had I been down here longer than I thought? My backpack felt heavy, not with its contents, but with the weight of my growing apprehension. I should have brought a flashlight. I usually did, but today, in my eagerness, I'd left it in the car. Another mistake. The list was growing. I continued for what felt like another 20 minutes, perhaps half an hour. The path was relentless, never seeming to ascend, only weaving deeper into the labyrinthine depths of the gorge. The stream I had crossed continued to parallel the path for a while, its gurgle a small comfort, but then it veered off, disappearing into a narrow crevice in the rock face. I was truly alone now, with only the rustling of my own clothes and the crunch of leaves underfoot for company. Then I saw it. It wasn't a landmark or a signpost, but something far stranger. Tucked away beside a particularly massive, moss-covered boulder stood a small, crudely carved wooden idol. It was about 2 feet tall, roughly humanoid in shape, but with exaggerated features. Wide, sightless eyes, a gaping mouth, and arms that seemed too long, terminating in blunt, fingerless hands. It looked ancient, its wood dark and weathered, almost absorbed by the surrounding moss and lichen. There was something unsettling about its stillness, its silent vigil in the darkening woods. My heart gave another lurch. What was this? It wasn't the kind of thing you found on public trails. This wasn't some quirky trail marker. It felt tribal, primitive, like something from a forgotten past. I approached it cautiously, my hand instinctively going to the small multi-tool on my belt, a useless gesture, I knew, but it offered a sliver of false comfort. As I got closer, I noticed something else. At the base of the idol, almost hidden by fallen leaves, lay a small, carefully arranged pile of smooth gray stones, and nestled among them, almost glowing in the dim light, was a single, freshly picked wild rose, its petals a deep, velvety red. It was a stark contrast to the rough idol and the decaying forest floor. Someone had been here recently, and they had left an offering. The hair on my arms stood up again. This wasn't just a random carving. This was a place of purpose, a place of something. A shiver ran down my spine. The image of those heavy, phantom footsteps flashed in my mind. Had they been the ones to leave this offering? The thought was absurd, yet it settled in my gut with a cold dread. I backed away slowly, my eyes still fixed on the idol. This was too much. The inexplicable footsteps, the oppressive silence, the deepening gloom, and now this archaic, unsettling offering. I had to get out. I had to turn back. But as I spun around, my intention firm, I noticed something else. The path I had just been on, the faint indentation in the leaves, seemed to have changed. It wasn't clear anymore. The undergrowth seemed to have thickened, closing in, or maybe in my panic I had just lost track of it. "No," I whispered, my voice hoarse. I walked a few steps back, retracing my path towards where I thought the idol was. The boulder was still there, but the path beyond it, leading back to the bridge, seemed to have vanished. It wasn't there. There was just a wall of dense saplings and thorny bushes, indistinguishable from the surrounding wilderness. Panic, cold and sharp, finally broke through my shaky composure. I wasn't just lost, I was disoriented. The light was failing fast, and the gorge felt like it was actively closing in on me. I tried to push through the undergrowth where I thought the path should be, but it was too thick, too tangled. Thorns snagged my clothes, tearing at the fabric. The woods felt alive, not with friendly creatures, but with an unseen, watchful presence. My breathing became shallow, ragged. This wasn't like any woods I knew. This wasn't the predictable, comforting embrace of nature. This was something else. I stumbled back towards the idol, feeling a perverse sense of safety in its silent company, even though it had just deepened my unease. I looked at the small pile of stones, the single red rose, who was leaving offerings in this forgotten corner of the gorge, and to what? I pulled out my phone, no signal. Of course, this far down, deep in the gorge, it was to be expected. I checked the time. It was well past 6. Dusk was officially settling. The comfortable buffer I always aimed for was not just gone. It had been devoured by the strange twilight of this place. I had to calm down. Panic was my enemy. I was a trained hiker. I knew how to orient myself, but everything felt wrong. The moss on the trees, which I usually used for direction, seemed to grow on all sides, a thick, uniform carpet. The sun, a distant memory, was impossible to gauge. "Okay," I said aloud, trying to inject some confidence into my wavering voice. "Okay, think, where did the stream go?" The stream had been my only reliable landmark. I remembered it veering off to the right into a crevice. If I could find it again, I could follow it, perhaps, back to the bridge. I turned right, away from the idol, and began to push through the denser undergrowth, aiming for where I thought the stream had disappeared. The forest floor was uneven, covered in slippery moss and loose rocks. The darkness was almost complete now, the last vestiges of light swallowed by the thick canopy. I stumbled, scraped my shin on a hidden root, and bit back a cry of pain. Suddenly, a sound, faint but distinct, reached my ears. It wasn't the rhythmic thump of footsteps or the gurgle of the stream. It was a low, mournful sigh. It seemed to come from deeper in the woods, a long, drawn-out exhalation that sent another jolt of ice through me. It wasn't animalistic, not a bear or a wolf. It sounded human, but stretched, distorted, like a sound struggling to escape. I froze again, every muscle tensed. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I held my breath, straining my ears, hoping it was just the wind, a trick of the falling leaves. But the air was utterly still. There was no wind. Then it came again, closer this time. A soft, rustling sound, like something brushing against the undergrowth, followed by another sigh, a little louder, a little closer, and undeniably full of a profound sadness. It wasn't menacing, not overtly hostile, but it was profoundly, terrifyingly other. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. The sound seemed to drift, to surround me, echoing off the unseen gorge walls. My mind raced, trying to conjure a rational explanation. A lost hiker, someone playing a trick, but the feeling of utter isolation in this place made those ideas crumble. Who would be out here in this impossible wilderness at this hour making such a sound? My flashlight, my compass, my whistle, all in the car. My preparedness, my pride had utterly failed me. I was just a 24-year-old in over her head, lost in a place that seemed to actively resist my presence. I decided irrationally that I would rather face whatever was making that sound than spend another minute trying to find a vanished path in the dark. If it was human, I needed help. If it wasn't, well, I didn't want to think about if it wasn't. Taking a shaky breath, I called out, my voice barely a croak. "Hello, is anyone there?" The mournful sigh stopped, the rustling stopped. The silence, previously unnerving, now became utterly terrifying. It was the silence of something having been interrupted, of something listening. I waited, straining my ears. Nothing, not a sound. It was as if the forest held its breath. "Hello," I tried again, a little louder this time, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "I'm lost. I need help." Still no answer, but then a subtle shift in the air, a cold spot. It wasn't a draft, it was localized, distinct, like stepping into a pocket of freezer air in a warm room. It was right beside me, to my left. I could feel it on my cheek, on my bare arm. I spun around, my eyes wide, trying to pierce the gloom. Nothing visible, but the cold was there, palpable, chilling me to the bone. And with it, a faint, almost imperceptible smell. Not pine, not damp earth, something else. Something metallic, like old pennies, mixed with the faint, sweet scent of decay. My heart hammered. This wasn't an animal. This wasn't a person. This was something else. My childhood fears, the ones I thought I'd outgrown, rushed back in a torrent. The monsters under the bed, the shadows in the closet. But these shadows were real, and they were here in the impenetrable depths of Oakhaven Gorge. I scrambled backward, away from the invisible cold spot, tripping over roots, desperate to put distance between myself and whatever it was. My mind screamed at me to run, to flee, but in which direction? Every way felt equally dark, equally unknown. As I backed away, my foot slipped on a patch of slick moss and I went down hard, my elbow scraping against a sharp rock. A cry of pain escaped my lips, but it was quickly stifled by the cold dread that enveloped me. When I looked up through the swirling motes of dust disturbed by my fall, I saw it. Or rather, I felt it before my eyes could fully discern it. There, just beyond the edge of the large boulder I had used as a makeshift landmark where the path should have been, something moved. It wasn't a rustle of leaves. It was a slow, deliberate shifting in the deep shadows, like an absence of light taking a physical form. It was too tall, too slender to be human. It seemed to sway almost lazily from side to side as if observing me. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't see details, just an impression of height, of impossible thinness, and eyes that glowed with a faint, predatory luminescence, 2 pinpricks of icy blue light piercing the oppressive darkness. No, this wasn't real. My mind was playing tricks on me. The fear, the exhaustion, the failing light, it had to be a tree stump, a trick of shadow, anything but what my terrified eyes were telling me. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again, forcing myself to focus. The blue pinpricks were still there, unwavering, and now I could make out a faint outline, a figure that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. It was impossibly thin, almost two-dimensional, yet it had a presence, a weight that pressed down on me. Its head tilted, slowly, deliberately, as if in curiosity. My rational brain, the one that had planned trails and packed gear, shattered. This was beyond anything I had ever encountered, anything I had ever believed possible. The phantom footsteps, the sighing, the idle, the cold, the smell, it was all connected. And it was all converging on me here in this forgotten hollow of the gorge. I let out a strangled gasp, scrambling backward on my hands and knees, desperate to get away. The figure didn't move, didn't pursue. It simply stood there, those 2 blue lights fixed on me, watching my frantic retreat. The absolute stillness of it was more terrifying than any aggressive lunge could have been. It was like being hunted by a silent, ancient predator that knew it had all the time in the world. My thoughts were a desperate whirlwind. Run, but where? The darkness was absolute now, broken only by those chilling blue eyes. My sense of direction was completely gone. The gorge had become a trap, and I, the confident hiker, had walked right into it. I needed light, I needed to see. My survival instinct screamed. I fumbled in my pockets, hoping for a stray lighter, a forgotten phone with a last flicker of battery. Nothing. Only the cold, smooth stones that had been at the base of the idol, which I must have picked up in my frantic movements earlier. A desperate, primal scream tore from my throat, raw and uncontrolled. It was a cry of pure terror, of utter helplessness. The sound was immediately swallowed by the dense woods, returning only a faint, mocking echo. The figure remained motionless, its blue eyes unwavering. It was almost as if my scream was an interesting observation, a curious sound to be catalogued. I forced myself onto my feet, ignoring the throbbing in my scraped elbow and shin. My legs felt like jelly, but the primal urge to escape overrode everything else. I turned and ran, blindly, recklessly, crashing through the undergrowth, not caring about thorns or roots or unseen obstacles. I just needed to get away from those eyes, from that impossible thinness, from the overwhelming sense of otherness. Branches whipped at my face, leaves rustled loudly, betraying my path. I stumbled, righted myself, and kept going. My lungs burned, my heart felt like it would explode, but I pushed harder. I had to get out. I had to. I ran for what felt like an eternity, but could only have been a few minutes. The ground began to slope downwards even more steeply, and the air grew noticeably colder, heavier, carrying with it the faint, metallic scent again. The trees here were different too, even older, their trunks twisted into grotesque, unnatural shapes, their branches interwoven so tightly that they formed a solid, black ceiling overhead. Suddenly, the ground under my feet disappeared. I cried out, arms flailing as I plunged downwards. It wasn't a sheer drop, more like a steep, moss-covered embankment that gave way beneath my weight. I tumbled, rolling over and over, leaves and dirt filling my mouth, sharp branches tearing at my clothes and skin. The fall was jarring, painful, but thankfully not long. I landed with a soft thud on a patch of surprisingly yielding, damp earth. I lay there for a moment, winded, disoriented, every muscle aching. My head was spinning. Slowly, I pushed myself up, groaning. Nothing felt broken, but I was bruised and battered. My hands, when I touched them to my face, came away sticky with something. Blood. My eyes, now somewhat adjusted to the profound darkness, struggled to make sense of my surroundings. I was in a hollow, a small enclosed depression in the gorge floor. The walls rose steeply around me, sheer rock faces covered in a thick, velvety moss that seemed to absorb all light and sound. The air here was even colder, almost freezing, and permeated with that strange, metallic, decaying smell. And then I saw it. In the center of this hidden hollow, almost perfectly circular, was another structure. Not a bridge this time. This was a stone circle. Roughly hewn, unadorned stones, perhaps 10 of them, stood upright, forming a ring about 15 feet in diameter. They weren't smooth or dressed. They were raw, ancient boulders arranged with a deliberate, unsettling geometry. They looked like teeth jutting from the earth. And within the circle, on a flat, central stone that seemed to pulse with an inner darkness, lay something. I couldn't make out the details in the gloom, but it was long, roughly human-shaped and still. My breath hitched. The air here was so cold it burned my lungs. I felt a profound sense of dread, far deeper than anything I had experienced before. This wasn't just a place of unsettling mystery. This was a place of sacrifice, of death. My eyes scanned the stones, the hollow, desperately searching for an exit, but there was none. The embankment I had fallen down was too steep to climb back up in the dark, and the walls of the hollow rose sheer and unyielding on all other sides. I was trapped. And then I heard it again. Thumpy, thumpy, thumpy. The footsteps, rhythmic, heavy, coming from above me, but this time they weren't on an invisible bridge. They were on the very rim of the hollow, directly overhead, and they weren't just passing. They were circling. My blood ran cold, the blue eyes, the thin, impossibly tall figure. It had followed me. It had known where I was going. It had led me here. I looked up frantically, my eyes straining into the absolute blackness that capped the hollow. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel the presence. It was there, just out of sight, pacing slowly, methodically on the edge of my prison. And with each thump, a tiny shower of dirt and pebbles rained down from above, landing softly on the moss-covered floor of the hollow. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a chance encounter. This wasn't a mistake on my part. I had been lured into this place, into this trap. The shortcut, the idol, the footsteps, the sighing, the figure, it was all part of some horrifying, deliberate design. I was the offering. My gaze fell back to the central stone, to the still, dark shape that lay upon it. What was it? A previous victim, a warning, or simply the place where I was meant to join it? A low, guttural growl rumbled through the hollow, not from above, but from the depths of the rock faces themselves. It was an ancient, resonant sound that vibrated through my very bones, a sound that spoke of deep earth and crushing power. It wasn't a growl of anger, but of anticipation, of hunger. My terror reached a crescendo. I was cornered. I was utterly, irrevocably lost. The dark figure above, the ancient growl from the earth, the stone circle of sacrifice, and the unknown shape in its center. There was nowhere to run, nothing to do. I was simply prey, waiting for the hunter to descend. The cold seeped into my core, numbing me. My mind, usually so active, so capable of problem-solving, was now a blank slate of pure, unadulterated fear. The last vestige of my self-assured ignorance had been utterly stripped away, replaced by the chilling, undeniable truth. I was not alone in Oakhaven Gorge, and whatever was with me did not wish me well. The cold was a physical weight pressing down on me, stealing the air from my lungs. My body, bruised and scraped, trembled uncontrollably, but it wasn't just from the chill. It was a primal, all-consuming fear that had finally stripped away every layer of rational thought. I was an animal in a snare, caught, waiting. The words echoed in my mind. I was the offering. My gaze darted from the impassive, ancient stones of the circle to the dark, still shape at its heart. It looked like a body curled and indistinct in the gloom, yet profoundly present, a silent testament to what awaited me. My eyes then snapped upwards, straining against the darkness to the rim of the hollow where I knew the tall, impossibly thin figure moved. Its rhythmic thumps were slower now, more deliberate, no longer just circling, but perhaps descending. I couldn't see it, but I felt its eyes, those two icy blue pinpricks, fixed on me, savoring the moment. The guttural growl, which I now felt more than heard, intensified. It wasn't just from the rock faces. It vibrated up through the damp earth beneath me, shaking my very bones, a deep, resonant hum that thrummed with ancient hunger. It was the sound of the earth itself awakening, demanding its due. I squeezed my eyes shut, a desperate, childish urge to make it all disappear. But the cold remained, the metallic scent of old pennies and decay intensified, and the terrifying symphony of thumps and growls continued, building in intensity. This wasn't a nightmare. This was real. When I opened my eyes again, the world was even darker, if that were possible. The air was thick, heavy, like breathing mud, and the silence, when the growling momentarily subsided, was no longer just an absence of sound, but a palpable presence, listening, waiting. My mind, for all its terror, latched onto one desperate thought. I wouldn't just lie down and accept this. I was a hiker. I was a survivor. Even if the odds were impossible, I had to try. My eyes frantically searched the hollow again. The walls were sheer, slick with moss, rising perhaps 20 or 30 feet. Too high, too smooth, too dark. The embankment I'd fallen down was a jumble of loose earth and rocks, but it looked impassable going up. Each stone in the circle was waist-high, too heavy to move. The central stone where the offering lay was flat, an altar. There was no escape. But then my gaze fell on the dark shape on the central stone. The offering. What was it? Perhaps not an offering, perhaps a warning, a tool. In my desperation, my mind clawed at any shred of possibility. I stumbled towards the circle, my legs heavy and unresponsive, my bruised body protesting every movement. The metallic scent was strongest here, mixed with a cloying, sickly sweetness that made my stomach churn. As I got closer, the outline of the shape became clearer. It was indeed humanoid, but disturbingly shriveled, like a mummified corpse. Its skin was leathery, pulled tight over bone, and its limbs were impossibly thin, almost like sticks. It wasn't just human-shaped. It was ancient human-shaped, a relic from a forgotten era, preserved by some unholy means. But what struck me most was what it held in its skeletal, withered hands clasped to its chest, a crude but unmistakably detailed wooden idol, almost identical to the one I'd seen by the path. Its wide, sightless eyes seemed to stare up at the impossible darkness above. My breath caught in my throat. The offering was human, or what was left of one. And the idol, it was a key, a symbol. It was a terrifying realization, a deeper layer of horror. This wasn't just a place of death. It was a place of ritual, of a cycle that had played out countless times before. Thump, thump, thump. The footsteps overhead were getting louder, closer. They were no longer circling. They were moving directly towards the embankment I had fallen down, the only potential entry point. It was coming down. Panic surged, cold and absolute. My fight-or-flight response, dulled by shock, roared to life. I couldn't climb. I couldn't hide, but I wouldn't just stand here and wait. My eyes swept the ground around me. Loose rocks, slippery moss, nothing. My hands instinctively went to my pockets again, desperately searching for anything. My multi-tool was useless. But then my fingers brushed against the smooth, cold stones I had unconsciously picked up earlier from the base of the idol by the vanished path. The gray stone. They were just stones, ordinary rocks, but in my mind they were connected to the idol, to this place. A flicker of an idea, desperate and illogical, sparked. I snatched a handful of the stones, my fingers fumbling. They were small, smooth, fitting easily into my palm. What could I do with them? Throw them? At what? The invisible, impossibly thin creature that absorbed light. It was a laughable, pathetic gesture, but it was something. As the first faint scraping sound reached my ears, the unmistakable sound of something descending the embankment, I knew my time was almost up. The figure was coming. The guttural growl rose again, a low, pleased rumble this time, as if in anticipation of a meal. It was no longer just a growl. I felt it deep in the earth, a vibration, a shift. The very ground trembled subtly. I backed away from the stone circle, clutching the stones, my eyes fixed on the embankment. The darkness there seemed to coalesce, deepen further. It was like watching a shadow detach itself from the wall. And then it was there. The figure, taller than I had imagined, easily 7 feet, perhaps more. Its impossible thinness made it seem almost two-dimensional, yet its presence was immense, oppressive. It was a void given form, absorbing all light, its outline barely discernible against the blackness of the gorge walls. Two pinpricks of icy blue light, its eyes were fixed on me, unwavering, radiating an ancient, cold intelligence. There was no discernible mouth, no nose, just the smooth, dark expanse of a head that tilted slightly, observing. Its limbs were long, spindly, ending in hands that were more like dark, skeletal branches, devoid of fingers, yet somehow capable of grasping. It moved with an eerie, almost liquid grace, as if gravity barely affected it, flowing down the last few feet of the embankment. I froze, transfixed by the horror. It was more alien, more terrifying than any monster my childhood nightmares had ever conjured. It was utterly, profoundly other. It reached the floor of the hollow, its movement silent, its presence radiating a chill that pierced through my clothes and skin, numbing my very soul. It took a single, slow, deliberate step towards me and then another. Each movement was accompanied by an almost imperceptible thump, not from its feet on the ground, but from within its own form, a deep, resonant vibration that I felt in my chest. It was the sound I had heard on the bridge, the sound from above. It was the bridge, or perhaps the bridge was a conduit for its presence. Its blue eyes never left mine, holding me captive, stripping me of all will to move. I was a rabbit caught in the gaze of a snake. The growl from beneath the earth intensified, a low, hungry purr now. It seemed to be coming from directly under the stone circle, vibrating the very ground beneath the mummified offering. The tall figure took another step, then another, slowly closing the distance between us. I could smell it now, distinct from the metallic decay of the hollow. A scent of ozone, like after a lightning strike, mixed with something profoundly ancient, like stale, stagnant air from a tomb that had been sealed for centuries. My hand, still clutching the smooth gray stones, suddenly felt a faint warmth emanating from them. A warmth that spread through my palm, a tiny spark of something contrary to the overwhelming cold. I looked down at them, then back up at the unblinking blue eyes of the creature. A desperate, insane thought flashed into my mind. The idol, the offering, the stones, the red rose, they were offerings. And what if these stones, taken from the idol's base, held some small power, some protective quality? It was a straw, but I was drowning. With a surge of adrenaline born of sheer desperation, I hurled one of the stones at the creature. It was a pathetic throw, born of weakness and terror, but it was an act of defiance. The small gray rock arced through the air, seemingly swallowed by the creature's dark form. There was no sound, no impact. It was as if it had simply ceased to exist the moment it touched the creature. The figure paused, its head tilted further, those blue eyes narrowing fractionally as if contemplating this unexpected act. There was no anger, no surprise, just a profound, ancient curiosity. Then slowly, deliberately, it raised one of its long, spindly limbs. It wasn't menacing, not yet. It was simply raising its arm. And as it did, the air around it shimmered, distorting like heat haze off asphalt. The metallic ozone scent spiked, making my head swim. My heart pounded, but the warmth from the remaining stones in my hand intensified. I had to do something, anything. "Get away!" I screamed, my voice raw, broken, but filled with a new, fierce resolve. I wasn't just prey, I was human, and I would not yield without a fight. I launched another stone, this one with more force, aiming directly for one of its glowing blue eyes. This time, as the stone flew, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker passed through the creature's form like a ripple across still water. It still made no sound, but the ripple was there. The creature's head tilted back slightly, its blue eyes widening, a hint of something that might have been surprise or perhaps amusement entering their cold depths. It lowered its raised limbs slowly, deliberately. And then it spoke. It wasn't a voice as I knew it, not a human sound. It was a cacophony, a disharmonious chorus of whispers and sighs, of rustling leaves and creaking wood, of deep earth groans and whined through ancient stone. All these sounds, distorted and layered, coalesced into a single, chilling utterance. It was not a language I understood, but the intent was clear, seeping into my mind like ice water. You are different. The words, or rather the impression of them, echoed in my skull, reverberating through my very being. The intensity of its presence grew, pressing down on me, threatening to crush me. My knees buckled, but I fought to remain upright. "What do you want?" I choked out, my voice barely a whisper against the cacophony of its voice. The figure took another step, its ethereal form seeming to stretch, to grow even taller, its blue eyes burning with an unsettling intensity. The growl from beneath the earth rose again, a frustrated, impatient rumble. The figure seemed to acknowledge the growl with a subtle shift in its form, a slight ripple. Then its voice resonated again, a chorus of whispering wind and shifting earth. "We seek a connection. You have the touch, the way." I stared, utterly bewildered. "The touch, the way, what are you talking about?" My mind raced, trying to find meaning in the impossible. What connection? What way? Was it talking about my connection to the woods, my intuition as a hiker, or something deeper, something I didn't even know I possessed? The creature's voice responded, growing more complex, adding the faint gurgle of a hidden stream, the distant hoot of an owl. "The bridge, the path, the offerings, they are thin places you walk between." Between what? My rational mind was screaming, but there was a strange, terrifying logic to its words, a logic that felt ancient and profound. Thin places. I remembered the bridge, the inexplicable footsteps, the shortcut that led me here. It all fit in a horrifying way. I had unknowingly stumbled into a place where the veil between worlds was thin, and I for some reason possessed the ability to cross it, or at least to perceive it. My hand still clutched the remaining smooth stones. The warmth was now a faint pulse, a steady thrum against my palm. I looked at the dark, shriveled figure on the central stone, then back at the impossible being before me. It wasn't just a monster, it was something else. Something ancient connected to this place, to this gorge. "What happens if I don't connect?" I asked, a desperate plea for understanding, for a way out. The creature didn't directly answer, but its voice filled the hollow again, a lament of wind and rustling leaves, laced with a new, chilling tone. "The hunger grows, the silence cannot hold." It gestured with one of its impossibly long, dark limbs towards the mummified offering on the central stone. "Others have come close, but you are different. You hold the echoes." Echoes? Was it talking about the phantom footsteps, the sigh? What did it mean? My head throbbed, trying to process the impossible. The growl from the earth rose to a frustrated crescendo, shaking the hollow violently. Dust and small pebbles rained down from the rim. The very air pulsed with unseen energy. The figure turned its head slightly towards the stone circle, then back to me, its blue eyes conveying an urgency that was utterly terrifying. "The old ones stir, they awaken. You must choose." Choose what? My mind was a chaotic mess of fear and confusion. Was it asking me to become another offering, to join the mummified figure, or was there another path, a way to use this touch it spoke of? I looked around the hollow again, desperately for any other sign, any other clue. The sheer walls, the ancient stones, the shriveled offering. There was nothing. I was truly trapped, suspended between the terror of the impossible creature before me and the unseen, hungry entity beneath the earth. The figure took another step towards me, its form seeming to solidify, to become denser, more real, its blue eyes burning with an almost feverish intensity. The metallic, decaying smell became overwhelming, filling my mouth with a bitter taste. The hunger will consume, the bridge will break, you must open the way. Open the way, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. How? I don't understand. Its voice was softer now, almost a coaxing whisper of wind through dry leaves, laced with an ancient, irresistible pull. The heart of the deep, the bridge within, you carry the key. Its long, skeletal limb extended slowly, pointing directly at my chest, right over my heart. My breath hitched my heart. The warmth of the stones in my hand suddenly felt significant. Was it talking about my life force, my soul, or something else entirely? The figure was now just a few feet away, its head tilted, those blue eyes boring into mine, a silent, powerful demand. The growl from the earth was a continuous, low thrum beneath my feet, growing increasingly impatient, shaking the hollow with an ominous rhythm. I looked down at the stones in my hand, the key, the bridge within, the echoes. It was all a terrifying riddle, and I was running out of time to solve it. My mind, despite the terror, was working furiously, trying to piece together the fragments of its alien communication. The bridge within, it had said, not the wooden bridge, but something internal, and the key was me. What if the stones, my stones from the idol, were not just a defense, but a tool? What if they could open something rather than block it? The idol by the path, the one I had taken the stones from, it was an offering place, a place of connection. A sudden, desperate plan born of primal fear and a flicker of illogical hope formed in my mind. If this thing wanted a connection, if it believed I had the touch, then maybe I could offer it one, but on my terms, not as a sacrifice, but as a bridge. I took a shaky breath, the metallic scent filling my lungs. The creature stood before me, unmoving, its blue eyes fixed on my face. The earth beneath me rumbled, a deep, hungry growl. With a defiant resolve, I raised my hand, the one clutching the smooth gray stones. The warmth in my palm pulsed. I looked directly into its glowing blue eyes. "You want a connection," I said, my voice gaining strength though it still trembled. "You want to open the way, then show me. Show me what you want me to connect to." The figure was still, its blue eyes seemed to flicker, as if processing this unexpected challenge. The cacophony of its voice rumbled deep within its form, a silent deliberation. Then slowly its long, spindly arm extended again, not towards me this time, but towards the center of the stone circle, towards the mummified offering. As it pointed, a faint, ethereal blue glow, like moonlight on water, began to emanate from its fingertips. The glow moved slowly, deliberately, over the mummified figure, illuminating it in startling detail. The offering was even more gruesome than I had first perceived. Its face, a shriveled mask, held an expression of profound agony. Its limbs were not just thin but twisted, as if racked by an impossible force. and in its chest a gaping dark hole as if something had burst forth or been torn out. The wooden idol in its hands seemed to be clinging to it, a desperate last grasp. The blue glow intensified, revealing something else. A faint, almost invisible shimmer around the mummified figure, a wavering, translucent aura like heat rising from pavement. It was a distortion in the air, a visible vibration, a residual presence, an echo. The echoes, they linger, they yearn, we hunger for completion. The creature's voice was back, a chorus of yearning whispers. The bridge, it is fractured, the old paths forgotten. You can mend, you can guide. Guide what? Guide them to what? To me. The terror was still there, but now it was mixed with a desperate, burgeoning understanding. This wasn't about consuming me. It was about using me, using my touch to mend the bridge, to open the way. But for what and for whom? I looked from the mummified figure bathed in eerie blue light to the implacable creature before me. It wasn't just a predator, it was an entity with a purpose, an ancient cosmic task that I had stumbled into. My gaze fell on the wooden idol clutched by the mummified figure. It was the same design as the one by the path, the same design from which I had taken these very stones. The connection, the key. Could the idol be a conduit, a focus? My mind raced, grappling with concepts that shattered everything I thought I knew about the world. The creature lowered its glowing hand, and the hollow was plunged back into almost complete darkness, save for the faint, steady blue pinpricks of its eyes. The earth growled again, a deeper, more insistent rumble. The times dwindles, the hunger will be unbound. Its voice was no longer coaxing, it was a warning, a threat. I made my decision. It was a terrifying gamble, but in action felt like a slow, agonizing surrender. If I was to be a bridge, then I would choose which way it led. Okay, I whispered, my voice hoarse but firm. I'll try, but I need to understand, I need to see. The creature's head tilted, the blue eyes widened slightly. To see, you must feel. To feel, you must open. Its long, skeletal arm reached out again, slowly towards me, not to grasp, but to offer. Its fingertips, dark and absorbing, hovered inches from my forehead. Every fiber of my being screamed to recoil, to run. But the terror of the growling earth, the certainty of being trapped, and the strange, desperate hope that this was a way out compelled me to stay still. I closed my eyes, bracing myself. A cold, tingling sensation like countless tiny needles touched my forehead. It wasn't painful, but profoundly unsettling. And then, a torrent. Not images, not sounds, but feelings. A rush of ancient memories, not my own, but of the gorge itself. The slow, relentless carving of rock by water, the whisper of wind through untouched forest, the deep, dark slumber of the earth. I felt the passage of eons, the slow dance of life and decay. And then other sensations, a profound loneliness, an agonizing sense of separation, a desperate yearning for connection, for wholeness. This was the hunger it spoke of, not for flesh, but for something else. A connection that had been broken, severed long ago. I saw, or rather felt, the thin places, not just the bridge, but other points throughout the gorge where the veil was permeable. Places where echoes lingered, where presences could almost cross. And the bridge, it was not just a bridge over a stream. It was a fracture, a wound in the fabric of existence itself, a place where the barrier between worlds had worn thin, allowing things to bleed through, to seep into reality. And then its hunger, the entity that stood before me. It wasn't evil in the human sense. It was a guardian, a shepherd, a gatherer. It existed to bridge the gap, to maintain the flow, to bring the echoes back. But the bridge was failing. The channels were clogged. The old ones beneath the earth were stirring, impatient, their hunger a raw, elemental force that threatened to shatter everything. They weren't just hungry for offerings, they were hungry for a return, for a realignment. The mummified offering on the central stone flashed in my mind's eye. It was an echo, a powerful residual imprint of someone who had walked between, but had been unable to fully cross, unable to mend. A failed attempt. A sacrifice not as an end, but as a misguided effort to force the connection. And my touch, I suddenly understood. It wasn't just that I could perceive the thin places. It was that I possessed an innate ability to navigate them, to act as a living conduit, a stable bridge where others had failed. My love for the woods, my deep connection to nature, my confident, almost instinctual understanding of the trails, it was all a manifestation of this touch. I saw paths where others only saw wilderness. I could walk between. The cascade of feelings intensified, threatening to overwhelm me. The entity removed its touch from my forehead and the torrent ceased. I gasped, opening my eyes, the hollow swimming before me. My head was pounding, my body aching, but my mind was clearer than it had ever been. I understood, and with understanding came a new, terrifying burden. The creature stood before me, its blue eyes watching, waiting. The growl beneath the earth was a low, urgent thrum. "You want me to fix it," I said, my voice barely a whisper, heavy with the weight of this new knowledge. "You want me to mend the bridge, to guide the echoes back, but where and how?" Its voice was a symphony of hope and desperation. "The heart of the deep, the true gate, it lies beyond. Follow the echoes, use the key." Its gaze dropped to the stones in my hand, then to the wooden idol clutched by the mummified figure. The key, the idol, my stones, my mind raced, putting the pieces together. The first idol, the one by the vanished path, had been an offering point, a marker for a thin place. This hollow, the stone circle, was another, and the mummified figure with its idol was a failed attempt, an echo trapped in the crossing. "The heart of the deep," I repeated, remembering the stream that had veered into a crevice, the one I had tried to find earlier. Was that the way? The creature offered no further explanation, only an expectant stillness, its blue eyes burning with an ancient plea. The earth growled, impatient, almost angry now. It was a demand. I looked down at the smooth gray stones in my hand. They still pulsed with a faint warmth. I had to go deeper, to the heart of the gorge, to the true gate, with the creature as my terrifying guide and the ominous rumble of the earth as my relentless clock. "All right," I said, the word a promise and a curse. "Show me the way." The tall, dark figure turned slowly, its back to me. It didn't move towards the embankment, but towards the far side of the hollow, where the sheer rock face seemed unbroken. It lifted one impossibly long, spindly arm and placed its hand against the moss-covered rock. As it touched the wall, the air shimmered again, but this time with a blinding flash of electric blue light that momentarily seared my eyes. The metallic scent intensified, choking me. The growl from the earth rose to a roar, shaking the hollow violently, threatening to bring the very walls down. When my vision cleared, the solid rock face was gone. In its place was an opening, a narrow, swirling vortex of dark, shimmering light like a window into a starless night sky. It pulsed with an unholy energy, drawing me in, and from its depths a profound, mournful wail, a chorus of trapped echoes, rose up, 1,000 voices crying out. This was the true gate, and I, the lost hiker, was meant to walk through it. My fear was absolute, but the strange sense of understanding, of purpose, was equally strong. I was a bridge, and the time had come to cross. I clutched the stones in my hand, taking a shaky step forward, then another, towards the shimmering portal. The entity remained by the opening, its blue eyes fixed on me, a silent guardian ushering me into the impossible. The cold, the smell of ozone and decay, the wailing echoes, it all intensified as I approached the swirling darkness. There was no turning back. This was the only way out or in. With one last glance at the stone circle, at the mummified offering, a silent prayer for its tortured soul, I stepped into the shimmering void, the unknown. The portal closed behind me with a soft, sucking sound, plunging me into an abyssal darkness far deeper than anything I had known before. A darkness filled with the mournful whispers of those who had walked between worlds and been lost. The abyssal darkness that enveloped me was not merely an absence of light. It was a living, breathing entity, a physical weight that pressed in from all sides, stealing my breath and threatening to crush me. It tasted of nothing, yet left a bitter, coppery tang on my tongue like old blood. The cold intensified, so profound it burned, not just on my skin but deep within my bones, chilling me to the marrow. My hands, still clutching the smooth gray stones, were numb, yet I clung to them as if they were the last anchors to the reality I knew. The mournful whispers that had drawn me into this void now surrounded me, a vast, undulating chorus of sorrow and regret. They weren't distinct voices, not at first, but a cacophony of overlapping sighs, gasps, and unintelligible murmurings, each one a tendril of despair curling around my heart. It was the sound of 1,000 souls, eternally lost, echoing through the empty expanse. My mind, still reeling from the entity's direct contact, struggled to process this new assault on my senses. This wasn't just a physical space, it was a dimension woven from memory and anguish, a graveyard of the in-between. I instinctively squeezed my eyes shut, but it made no difference. There was nothing to see, only to feel, and what I felt was boundless, terrifying emptiness punctuated by the ghostly cries of the lost. My body, already battered and bruised from the fall, felt weightless, adrift. I couldn't tell up from down, forward from back. It was like falling endlessly through an infinite black abyss. A wave of nausea washed over me, a sickening disorientation that threatened to break my tenuous hold on consciousness. I gasped, trying to find a footing that wasn't there, a solid surface that refused to materialize. My sense of self began to fray at the edges, my identity blurring in the face of such overwhelming otherness. Who am I? Where am I? The questions spiraled unanswered. Then a flicker, not of light but of presence, distinct from the ambient wailing, a subtle shift in the currents of despair that surrounded me. It was like a chill within the already crushing cold, a specific point of profound sadness. My eyes, still closed, snapped open as if I could somehow see this presence in the darkness. And then I did, or rather I felt it with a new, terrifying clarity. The entity's touch had opened something in me, a raw, exposed nerve that now perceived the echoes with unnerving precision. Before me, not visible in any conventional sense, but clear as day to this new inner sight, was a swirling, indistinct mass of dark energy, slightly denser than the surrounding void. It wasn't a solid form, more like a coagulation of shadows, yet it radiated an almost unbearable aura of loneliness. As I focused, the whispers around it coalesced, becoming momentarily clearer, distinct. My home, lost the way, forgotten. These were not just sounds, they were fragmented thoughts, raw emotions bleeding into my mind. A woman's voice, hoarse with ancient despair. My heart ached with a profound, empathic sorrow that was not my own. This was an echo, one of the lost, and my touch was allowing me to perceive it, to connect with it. But what was I supposed to do? The entity had said to guide them back. How do you guide a spectral presence through an infinite void? I forced myself to take a shaky breath, trying to anchor myself in the midst of this existential freefall. The smooth gray stones in my hand thrummed with a faint, steady warmth. The key, the entity had called them, but a key to what? I extended my hand not towards the echo, but holding the stones outward, a desperate, illogical gesture. "Hello," I whispered, my voice swallowed by the vastness, yet somehow I felt it reached the presence before me. "Can you hear me?" The swirl of dark energy pulsed. The fragmented whispers intensified, but no clear response, just a deepening sense of confusion and longing. And the light, where is the light? It was yearning for the world it had lost. It was blind in this abyss, just as I was, but I had a guide, an understanding it lacked. A sudden, jarring thought struck me. The entity had said, "The heart of the deep, the true gate, it lies beyond. Follow the echoes." This echo, this lost soul, was not the destination. It was a guide itself, a waypoint. I took another desperate internal inventory. My physical body was still intact, if battered. My mind, though overwhelmed, was functioning, and I had the stones. "I can help you," I projected, focusing all my will into the thought, pouring it into the swirling mass of shadow. "I can try to find the light. Will you come with me?" The echo wavered, pulsed, and then slowly, impossibly, began to drift towards me. It was not a conscious movement, not a decision, but an instinctual pull towards the flicker of something it perceived as hope. As it drew closer, the cold around me intensified, and the metallic, decaying smell, which I realized was part of its lingering presence, grew stronger. It was a raw, visceral experience of death and yearning. I braced myself, fighting the urge to recoil. This was my purpose, my impossible task, to be a bridge. As the shadow form drifted within inches of me, the warmth from the stones in my hand suddenly flared, a startling pulse of heat that spread through my arm. And simultaneously, an image, clear as a photograph, flashed in my mind. The wooden idol, clutched in the hands of the mummified offering in the stone circle. It was not a memory I had consciously retrieved. It was given to me, an impression from the echo itself, a fragment of its last sight, its last desperate connection. The idol was a symbol, a beacon, an anchor to the world beyond. The echo, it seemed, was tethered to that idol, that specific thin place. And perhaps my stones, taken from an identical idol, held a similar resonance. They were not just physical objects, they were keys to perception, to interaction within this in-between realm. "The idol," I whispered, the word feeling heavy with meaning. "That's what you remember, that's what you're connected to." The echo swirled, its whispers becoming a torrent of conflicting emotions, fear, longing, confusion. It was trying to communicate, but its thoughts were fractured, its will diffused. I realized I wasn't just guiding a lost soul, I was interacting with a broken mind, a fragmented existence. I held up the stones, focusing on their warmth. These can help, I murmured, more to myself than to the echo. They connect, they create a path. As I spoke, the ethereal warmth from the stones extended, a subtle energy that seemed to emanate from my palm, flowing outwards. It wasn't a visible light, but it was a perceptible presence, a gentle current within the chaotic darkness. The echo, sensing this, slowly began to coalesce around my outstretched hand, its form less diffuse, more focused. It was like watching smoke gather, driven by an unseen force. This was it. This was mending the bridge, not by rebuilding wood and rope, but by acting as a living conduit, extending my touch to guide the lost. We need to find the heart of the deep, I told the echo, projecting my intention with all the conviction I could muster. The true gates, can you show me the way there, or at least can you feel a pull? The echo, now seemingly attached to the gentle current from my hand, pulsed with a renewed, though still fragile, sense of direction. It didn't move me, but it indicated a direction, a subtle leaning within the void, an almost imperceptible shift in the currents of despair. It was as if a faint, almost forgotten memory of a pathway, a resonance from its past life, was stirring within its form. I followed its subtle pull, stumbling through the boundless darkness. It was slow, laborious progress, a journey made entirely by instinct and a new, unsettling form of perception. The chorus of other whispers, the myriad of lost souls that populated this abyss, seemed to recede slightly as I moved, as if giving us a wide berth, or perhaps as if my connection to this one echo somehow shielded me from their direct assault. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours or even days. Time had no meaning here. The cold was constant, the taste of nothingness unchanging. My body ached with a profound spiritual exhaustion. I clung to the faint warmth of the stones and the fragile guiding presence of the echo as my only beacons. As we drifted deeper, the nature of the abyss began to subtly change. The ambient whispers didn't disappear, but they began to shift, to blend, as if the raw sorrow was being filtered through something else. The overwhelming sense of infinite space began to give way to something more structured, more confined. I felt walls, not physical walls, but barriers of energy, of suppressed emotion pressing in. It was like moving from an open ocean into a narrow canyon, still dark, still unseen, but with a definite sense of direction. The metallic, decaying scent intensified, but now it was layered with a new smell, damp earth and something distinctly sulfuric. The earth growl, which had been distant and abstract since entering the portal, began to return, a low, ominous thrum that vibrated through my body, resonating not just in my ears but in my very bones. This was the Old One stirring, the presence that hungered from beneath the earth. The echo attached to my hand reacted to the growl, flaring with renewed terror and confusion. Its whispers became more frantic, more desperate. The deep, the darkness, it calls. "We're getting closer," I whispered, my voice hoarse but trying to project reassurance. "To the heart of the deep, to the true gate." The sense of being in a confined space grew stronger. It was still absolute darkness, but I could now feel, rather than see, the presence of immense, unseen rock formations around me. It was like being in a vast, subterranean cavern miles beneath the surface, yet without any light to pierce the gloom. The air grew thick, heavy, carrying the scent of millennia of undisturbed earth. Suddenly, a new sensation. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor through the unseen ground beneath me. Not the growl, which was a constant, low thrum, but a ripple, a movement of some immense, unseen mass. My skin prickled. Then ahead of us, or rather, in the direction the echo was pulling, a new kind of light began to bloom. It wasn't the welcoming light of day, nor the eerie blue glow of the entity. This was a deep crimson light pulsing with a slow, infernal rhythm. It seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the darkness, radiating heat and an overwhelming sense of ancient power. It pulsed with the same rhythm as the earth growl, a silent, internal beat. The true gate, the heart of the deep. As we drew closer, the crimson light intensified, revealing faint, indistinct outlines in the darkness. Immense, ancient rock formations, their surfaces impossibly smooth, polished by millennia of unseen forces. And in the very center of this infernal glow, a monumental archway, carved not by hand, but by the slow, inexorable grinding of the earth itself. It was a natural formation, yet imbued with an unmistakable sense of deliberate design, a gateway between unimaginable depths. And around this archway, flowing like rivers of shadow, were other echoes, dozens, hundreds, perhaps thousands of them. They were drawn to the crimson light, swirling in a silent dance of yearning, their whispers a deafening, unified chorus of sorrow and hope. They were waiting, waiting for the bridge to mend, for the way to open. My echo, still clinging to my outstretched hand, seemed to gain strength, its form becoming slightly more defined in the pervasive crimson glow. It was like a faint, shimmering silhouette, a ghost drawn from the deepest shadows. Its whispers, too, grew more coherent, less fractured. Almost there, the warmth, the way home. I focused on the archway. It was colossal, perhaps 100 feet tall, and opening into an even deeper, more profound darkness. And from within that deeper darkness, the earth growl emanated with an overwhelming physical force, shaking the entire cavern. This wasn't just a growl anymore. It was a rhythmic thump, 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 like a gigantic heart beating, slow and powerful, demanding release. And then I saw them. Not the entity from the hollow, but others. More impossibly thin, dark figures, their blue eyes burning like distant stars, emerged from the surrounding shadows. They were guardians, shepherds, like the one that had guided me, but these were older, grander, their forms even more attenuated, more ethereal. They moved with a silent, watchful grace, observing the swirling echoes and, most disturbingly, observing me. There were perhaps 10 of them arranged in a silent semicircle before the archway, their presence adding another layer of chilling power to the scene. My echo seemed to shy away from them, a faint tremor running through its form, its whispers becoming agitated. The watchers, they wait for the crossing. The watchers, they were waiting for me. Waiting for my touch to complete the ritual, to open the way. I approached the archway, my echo still tethered to my hand, the gray stones radiating a steady warmth. The air here was thick with energy, a tangible pressure that threatened to squeeze the breath from my lungs. The crimson light pulsed with the thumping heart of the earth, illuminating the countless swirling echoes. One of the watchers, taller and seemingly older than the others, its blue eyes burning with an ancient wisdom, drifted forward, stopping directly before me. Its voice echoed in my mind, not the chaotic cacophony of the first entity, but a clearer, more resonant chorus of ancient wind and deep earth. You have come, the bridge you carry it, the echoes they gather, the hunger awaits. It gestured with a long, spindly arm towards the archway and then slowly towards my hand, towards the stones. The key, it unlocks the path. The heart, it binds the way. Bring them home. Bring them home, that was my task, to guide the echoes through the true gate back to wherever they belonged. But how, and what was on the other side, and what would it cost me? I looked at the archway. It was a churning vortex of darkness, almost identical to the portal I had stepped through, but infinitely larger, more powerful, radiating an immense gravitational pull that tugged at my very being. This was not just a passage, it was a gateway to another realm. The earth growl intensified, the rhythmic thumping growing louder, more insistent. It was no longer a demand, it was a desperate plea, a raw, primal cry from the depths. The hunger was growing, the old ones were truly stirring. I knew with an unsettling certainty what I had to do. The stones in my hand, the key, were meant to be used. They were not just for perceiving the echoes, but for guiding them, for focusing my touch. I looked at my echo, still clinging to my hand, its faint form now pulsing with a fragile hope. Then I looked at the multitude of other echoes, swirling, yearning, waiting. And then at the watchers, silent, expectant, their blue eyes fixed on me. The bridge, though it is fractured, I repeated the words the first entity had spoken. I can mend it. I raised my hand, the one clutching the smooth gray stones. The warmth flared, spreading through my arm, through my chest, radiating outward. It wasn't just heat. It was a pure, potent energy, a life force I hadn't known I possessed. My touch. I focused all my will, all my newfound understanding on the archway, on the true gate. I pictured the broken bridge, the fragmented paths, and in my mind I began to weave them together, using the energy of the stones as my loom, my touch as the thread. As I concentrated, the gray stones in my hand began to glow, not with warmth, but with a soft, ethereal blue light mirroring the eyes of the watchers. The light pulsed in rhythm with my own heartbeat, a steady, defiant thrum against the overwhelming thumping of the earth. And then I extended my hand towards the archway, towards the swirling darkness of the true gate. The blue light from the stones flowed out not as a beam, but as a shimmering, translucent pathway of energy, stretching across the space between me and the portal. It was a bridge of pure light, woven from my own essence and the power of the stones, spanning the abyss. As the light bridge solidified, a collective gasp, a unified sigh of hope, swept through the cavern from the gathered echoes. The crimson glow from the archway seemed to dim slightly, subsumed by the new blue light. The earth growl quieted, softening to a low, anticipatory rumble. Even the watchers seemed to hold their breath, their blue eyes widening fractionally. My echo, still attached to my hand, trembled, and then, with an almost imperceptible shift, it began to flow forward, drawn inexorably towards the blue light bridge. It was like a river of shadow finding its course. "Go," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion but firm. "Go home." And as it touched the light bridge, something extraordinary happened. The echo's shadowy form began to shimmer, to brighten, gaining definition. Its fragmented whispers coalesced into a single, clear woman's voice filled with an indescribable relief. "Thank you for the way, for the light." And then, as it moved onto the bridge, it dissolved. Not vanished, but transformed, dissipating into countless shimmering motes of blue light that flowed swiftly along the bridge into the heart of the true gate and disappeared into the deeper darkness beyond. It was a gentle, beautiful release, a return. A profound sense of exhaustion washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of exhilaration. I had done it. I had guided an echo home. The energy radiating from the stones in my hand remained strong, the blue light pathway still stretched before the gate, and the remaining echoes, hundreds of them, were stirring. They surged forward, a tidal wave of yearning presences, drawn by the newly mended bridge, by the visible pathway to their forgotten home. One by one, they began to flow onto the bridge of light, each one shimmering, gaining definition, their fragmented whispers coalescing into words of gratitude and relief, before dissolving into light and passing through the gate. It was an astonishing, heartbreaking spectacle, a procession of the lost finding their way back. The watchers remained silent, their blue eyes fixed on the unfolding miracle, their forms radiating a deep, ancient satisfaction. The earth growl was now a soft, content hum vibrating through the cavern. The hunger was being sated, not with sacrifice, but with release. But as more and more echoes flowed across the bridge, I felt the toll. The energy flowing from me through the stones was immense. My body trembled, not from cold or fear, but from the sheer exertion. My head swam and my vision began to blur at the edges. The blue light from the stones flickered, threatening to dim. I knew I couldn't sustain this indefinitely. My human limits were rapidly approaching. There were still so many echoes, a seemingly endless tide of them waiting to cross. The oldest watcher, the one that had spoken to me, drifted closer. Its voice resonated in my mind, a comforting hum now rather than a demand. You are strong, the bridge it holds, but the path it is long, the gate it demands much. It gestured again with its spindly arm, not at the echoes, but at me, specifically at my chest, over my heart. The heart of the deep, the bridge within, you give and you receive. Draw from the other side. You are the conduit. You are the balance. Draw from the other side, receive. What did that mean? I was giving everything I had. But to receive, I looked at the shimmering blue light bridge reaching into the infinite darkness of the true gate. Was it telling me to draw energy from there, from the very place I was sending the echoes? It was a terrifying thought, a reversal of the flow. As if sensing my hesitation, the watcher extended its hand, and this time its dark, absorbing fingers, devoid of light, gently touched my forehead. It was the same cold, tingling sensation as before, but this time the torrent of feelings was different. It wasn't memories of the gorge or the hunger of the old ones. It was a profound sense of peace, of wholeness, of belonging. I felt the interconnectedness of everything, the subtle energies that flowed between all living things, the gentle rhythm of the cosmos. I felt the immense, ancient power of the gorge itself, not as a source of threat, but as a vast, benevolent reservoir of energy, pulsing with life. And I felt the echoes not as lost souls, but as threads of consciousness, returning to the weave, completing a tapestry. And from that sense of connection, a new kind of energy flowed into me. It wasn't the frantic surge of adrenaline, but a calm, steady, profound power. A deep wellspring of vitality that began to replenish my depleted reserves. It was the balance. I was giving, but the act of giving, of mending the bridge, was also connecting me to the deeper currents of the gorge, allowing me to draw strength from the vast, ancient network of life and energy that permeated this hidden world. My vision cleared, the trembling in my body ceased. The blue light from the stones and the bridge solidified, burning brighter than before. The steady hum of the earth growl intensified, not with hunger, but with a deep, resonant satisfaction. I looked at the endless stream of echoes flowing across the bridge, each one finding its release, its peace. I was no longer just a lost hiker. I was the bridge itself, a living conduit, holding the balance between worlds. My fear had not vanished entirely, but it had transformed into a profound sense of awe and purpose. I was part of something ancient, something far grander and more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. Hours passed, or perhaps moments. Time was an irrelevant concept in this place. The stream of echoes began to thin, slowly, gradually. The vast multitude that had awaited passage dwindled. My body, though replenished by the flow of energy, still felt the strain of such immense spiritual work. Finally, the last echo, a faint, almost transparent shimmer, flowed across the bridge, dissolving into light as it passed through the gate. The chorus of whispers, which had been constant, now faded into a profound, resonant silence. The crimson glow from the archway dimmed, and the blue light bridge, no longer needed, began to waver, to shimmer, to withdraw. As the light bridge dissipated, the oldest watcher drifted forward again, its blue eyes, now softened, filled with a gentle gratitude. The bridge it is mended, the echoes they are home, the hunger it sleeps. It paused, then its gaze fell upon the stones in my hand. The blue light within them had faded, leaving them once again smooth and gray, but they felt different now, imbued with an inner resonance. The key it has served, the balance is restored for now. The last two words hung in the air, a subtle warning within the quiet. For now, this was not an end, but a temporary reprieve. The thin places would always exist. The hunger could always awaken again. The watcher then turned, its form blending seamlessly back into the deeper shadows from which it had emerged, followed by the other guardians. The cavern was silent once more, save for the low, contented hum of the earth, a deep, satisfied rumble that resonated through the profound darkness. The crimson light from the true gate pulsed softly, no longer demanding, but simply existing. I stood alone before the immense, natural archway, the true gate, the smooth gray stones still clutched in my hand. The absolute darkness of the cavern felt less terrifying now, imbued with a new, ancient familiarity. I had walked through the impossible, become a bridge between worlds, and lived. But where did I go from here? The gate was behind me, the echoes were home, and the watchers were gone. The way back through the swirling portal into Oakhaven Gorge was not visible. I was still deep within the earth, in the heart of the deep. My journey was far from over. I had fulfilled my purpose for now, but I was still lost, still trapped, still alone. And the profound silence that had settled upon the cavern after the release of so many souls felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken truths. I had learned the rules of this impossible world, but navigating it remained a mystery. The profound silence that had settled upon the cavern after the release of so many souls felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken truths. I had learned the rules of this impossible world, but navigating it remained a mystery. My legs felt like lead, yet my mind, for all its exhaustion, was buzzing with a clarity I'd never known. The stones in my hand, now smooth and ordinary looking, pulsed with a faint inner resonance against my palm, a constant reminder of the impossible power I had wielded. I was alone, standing before the immense natural archway of the true gate. It pulsed with a soft, crimson light like a sleeping heart, no longer demanding, simply existing. The cavern around me was still pitch black beyond that glow, but it no longer felt utterly devoid of shape. My new perception, the touch that allowed me to see the echoes, now extended to the very fabric of this place. I could sense the immense, unseen rock formations, the vastness of the subterranean space, not through sight, but through a profound, intuitive awareness. The low, contented hum of the earth vibrated through my bones, a deep, satisfied rumble that seemed to whisper of ancient slumber. The hunger was sated for now. But the way back, the portal I had stepped through, the shimmering vortex that had opened in Oakhaven Gorge was gone. I was miles beneath the surface, in a place no human should ever witness, and certainly not one who wished to return to their own world. I took a shaky breath, the air thick with the scent of ancient earth, sulfur, and a lingering, faint ozone. My eyes, still accustomed to the darkness, strained to find anything, any crack or crevice that might lead upwards. But there was nothing. Just the smooth, colossal walls of the cavern stretching into the unseen ceiling far above. "Hello," I whispered, my voice sounding impossibly small, swallowed by the immense space. "Is anyone there?" Only the soft hum of the earth answered. The watchers, the tall, thin guardians, had vanished completely, melting back into the shadows from which they had emerged. They had done their part, and I apparently had done mine. Now I was on my own. My gaze fell on the stones in my hand. They were cold now, but the inner thrum remained. The key it has served, the old watcher had said. If they were a key, what did they unlock now? Could they show me a path out, just as they had shown me the way to guide the echoes? I extended my hand, holding the stones out before me in the absolute darkness. I closed my eyes, trying to focus, to feel with this new sense. Instead of reaching for echoes, I tried to reach for pathways, to sense the thin places not just in the veil between worlds, but in the very rock around me, places where the boundaries between this cavern and what lay beyond might be permeable. For a long moment there was nothing but the vast, empty darkness and the contented hum of the earth. Then a faint flicker, not light, not an echo, but a current, a subtle flow of energy like an invisible stream somewhere to my left. It was incredibly faint, barely perceptible, but it was there, and it felt different from the ambient energy of the cavern. It felt like a subtle disruption, a weakness in the otherwise solid rock. I took a tentative step towards it, then another. The current grew infinitesimally stronger, a subtle pull, a whisper of a direction. It wasn't a visible path, but it was a path nonetheless, revealed by my awakened touch. The stones in my hand thrummed almost imperceptibly in response, a confirmation. It led me away from the true gate, away from the pulsating crimson light, deeper into the absolute darkness of the cavern. The air grew colder once more, but it was a natural cold, the cold of deep earth, not the chilling, ancient cold of the entities. The scent of sulfur and damp earth grew stronger, mingling with a fresh, mineral tang of rock. The path, if I could call it that, was not a clear tunnel. It was a series of subtle shifts in pressure, faint currents of energy, leading me through what felt like an immense, winding maze of unseen rock. I extended my hands, moving slowly, cautiously, my fingertips occasionally brushing against the smooth, damp surfaces of colossal rock walls. It was unnerving, navigating a world entirely by a sense that was not sight, relying on a feeling that bordered on the psychic. Every creak of my bruised body, every scuff of my boots on the unseen floor, echoed in the vastness. As I moved deeper, the earth hum began to change. It wasn't a hostile growl, but it wasn't the contented purr of the cavern either. It became more complex, layered with subtle vibrations, like a symphony played by unseen tectonic plates. It was the sound of the living earth, a constant, underlying pulse that spoke of immense geological forces at work. My touch seemed to pick up on these vibrations too, distinguishing natural movements from the more sinister energies of the other entities. The path led me into what felt like a natural fissure, a narrow crack in the earth, barely wide enough for my body. I had to squeeze through, my backpack scraping against the rough rock, the metallic tang of iron ore strong in the confined space. The claustrophobia was overwhelming, a primal fear of being crushed alive, but the faint current, the guiding presence, drew me onward. I emerged into another, smaller chamber, still utterly dark, but with a different feel. It was cooler here, and I could hear, very faintly, the distant sound of trickling water. A natural cavern, finally, a small victory, a glimmer of hope. I tried to use the stones again to sense a direction towards the surface, towards the source of the water. But this time the current was not as clear. It was diffused, scattered. It was as if this was a less thin place, a place where my new abilities were less potent. This was the ordinary earth, albeit miles beneath the surface, and it didn't readily offer up its secrets in the same way. Frustration, cold and sharp, began to prick at the edges of my resolve. I had gone through so much, been transformed, completed an impossible task, only to find myself still trapped, still lost. The euphoria of guiding the echoes had faded, replaced by the grim reality of my situation. I leaned against a cold, damp rock face, trying to catch my breath, trying to calm the frantic beat of my heart. The sound of trickling water was a lifeline, a promise of the outside world, but it was distant, muffled. As I rested, my mind, still processing the immense downloads from the entity, began to sift through the fragmented information. The bridge, the path, the offerings, they are thin places you walk between, and the heart of the deep, the true gate, it lies beyond. Follow the echoes, use the key. And finally, the heart of the deep, the bridge within, you give and you receive. Draw from the other side. You are the conduit. You are the balance. The balance, that was key. I had given and I had received energy. What if drawing from the other side wasn't just about replenishing my own energy, but about subtly manipulating the environment itself? What if my touch, enhanced by the stones, could not only perceive but influence the thin places? I closed my eyes again, holding the stones tightly. I tried to focus not on finding a path, but on creating one, or rather, on revealing one that was already there but hidden. I pictured the gorge above, the sunlight, the trees, the rushing stream. I pictured the path I had vanished from. I tried to mentally project my touch upwards, to stretch it through the layers of rock, to find a resonance, a connection to my own world. It was like trying to feel a single blade of grass from miles away. It was incredibly difficult, almost impossible. But as I focused, pushing past the pain and exhaustion, I felt a faint, almost imperceptible tug. Not a current in the rock, but a current through it, drawing me upwards. And then a sound, not the trickling water, but something else. A faint, almost imperceptible creak. The kind of sound a very old, very heavy wooden beam might make under immense pressure. It was distant, but unmistakably familiar. The bridge. My eyes snapped open. The creaking sound was so faint it could have been imagination, but after everything I had experienced, I knew better than to dismiss it. It was a sign. A resonance of a thin place, a pathway, perhaps, that connected this deep cavern directly to the very bridge I had fallen from. The subtle upward tug intensified, drawing me towards an unseen wall in the small chamber. I moved towards it, my heart pounding with a renewed, desperate hope. As I approached, the wall felt subtly different under my outstretched hand. Cooler, perhaps, or was it just my imagination? I pressed the stones against the rock. No visible change, no shimmering portal, but the creaking sound intensified, still distant but clearer now, accompanied by a faint metallic scent. Ozone, and that faint, cloying sweetness. The lingering scent of the entity, the guardian of the original portal. It was still a thin place. I pressed harder, willing the connection. My touch surged, flowing from my heart through my arm into the stones and then into the rock face. I wasn't trying to break the rock. I was trying to open a channel, to reveal a path where the veil was thinnest. The rock face shimmered, not with blinding light, but with a subtle distortion, like heat haze. It was localized, a circular patch about the size of a doorway. The creaking sound became clearer still, almost as if I were standing directly beneath the old wooden bridge. A gasp escaped my lips. It was working. My touch could not only perceive, but influence these thin places. I pushed through the shimmering distortion. It felt like walking through thick, cold water, a sensation of pressure and profound chill. The metallic, sweet scent was overwhelming, filling my lungs. For a moment, I was suspended in a swirling, featureless void reminiscent of the first portal, but much smaller, much more contained. And then I stumbled forward, falling onto something cold, hard, and wet. My eyes, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, were assaulted by a faint ambient light. Not sunlight, but the dim gray light of twilight, filtered through a canopy of dense trees. Above me, partially obscured by damp earth and moss, was the underside of the old wooden bridge. The planks were rotting, covered in slick green algae, just as I remembered. The creaking I had heard was real, the groaning of ancient wood under the slow decay of time and water. I was back, or at least very close. I had emerged not in the hollow, but beneath the bridge where the stream flowed, directly below the thin place where my journey had begun. I pushed myself up, my body protesting every movement, muscles screaming from the exertion and the battering they had taken. The air here, though damp and cold, tasted sweet, like pine and wet earth, not ozone and decay. It was a normal smell, and it was glorious. I looked around. The stream flowed silently over smooth, dark rocks. Moss-covered boulders lined the bank. The forest rose steeply on either side, a wall of ancient trees, their branches interlaced high above, blocking out the sky. It was exactly as I remembered it, yet utterly changed by my new perception. The air still thrummed with a faint, almost imperceptible energy, the thinness of the place, but it was no longer menacing, just present. My gaze drifted upwards, towards the underside of the bridge. The wooden planks, even in the dim light, seemed to pulse with a subtle internal glow that only I could perceive. It was the residual energy of the thin place, the scar where the veil had been breached, and now I knew it had been mended. My actions had brought a measure of balance, a temporary peace to the hungry earth. But what about the entity, the tall, dark figure with the blue eyes, the guardian of this specific thin place? I scanned the shadows beneath the bridge, the dense foliage along the banks. Nothing. No presence, no radiating cold. It seemed to have receded, its task, too, completed for now. I slowly made my way out from under the bridge, moving towards the bank. The ground was steep and slippery, but I found purchase, climbing carefully until I stood on the path that ran along the stream. It was the same path I had followed earlier, the one that should have led me to the main trail. Everything looked normal, too normal. The dense forest, the winding stream, the familiar path. But I knew with a chilling certainty that nothing would ever be normal again for me. My perceptions had been irrevocably altered. I glanced back towards where the shortcut trail should have been, the one I had taken that morning. It was gone, not just overgrown, but completely vanished, as if it had never existed. The dense undergrowth was unbroken, a solid wall of green. The idol that had marked its entrance, the one from which I had taken my stones, was also nowhere to be seen. It was as if the thin place had truly sealed itself, removing all traces of its former existence. My hand instinctively went to my pocket, finding the smooth gray stones. They were still there, still warm with that faint inner resonance. They were no longer just ordinary rocks. They were a part of me now, a connection to a world beyond human comprehension. I knew I needed to get back to civilization, back to my car, back to safety. The sun was likely setting, or had already set, given the deep twilight beneath the canopy. The hike back would be long and arduous, especially in my battered state. but the immediate, crushing terror had subsided, replaced by a profound exhaustion and a strange, quiet sense of accomplishment. I started walking slowly at first along the familiar path, putting one foot in front of the other. My muscles screamed, my head throbbed, and every bruise protested. But I kept going. The hum of the earth was still with me, a deep, comforting vibration now, a reminder of the immense, living world that lay beneath my feet. As I walked, I began to notice subtle things I would have missed before. A faint shimmer in the air near a particularly ancient tree, a brief flicker of cold in a secluded glade, the almost imperceptible whisper of unseen currents of energy flowing through the landscape. The thin places were everywhere, subtly woven into the fabric of the woods. My perception had been opened, and now I saw them, felt them everywhere. They were no longer terrifying threats, but simply aspects of a deeper reality, a layer of existence that had always been there, hidden in plain sight. The woods, which I had always loved, now held a new, profound mystery. They were not just trees and earth and creatures. They were a living, breathing nexus of worlds, a silent, ancient network of energies and presences. And I, the ordinary hiker, was now a part of it. I walked for what felt like hours. The ambient light faded completely, plunging the forest into true darkness, but my steps were surer now. My eyes had adjusted, and even in the gloom I could perceive shapes and forms with an almost animalistic acuity. The faint, internal glow of the thin places became my guide, a series of subtle markers in the pervasive darkness. Finally, through a break in the trees, I saw it, the faint, yellow glow of the trailhead parking lot. It was just a small patch of light against the inky blackness of the forest, but it was a beacon, a symbol of my return to the human world. My pace quickened, spurred by a desperate longing for the mundane, for the simple reality of asphalt and car engines and cell service. I stumbled out of the woods, blinking against the harsh, artificial light of the single streetlight in the empty parking lot. My car, battered but familiar, sat alone, exactly where I had left it. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking. The small, familiar object felt impossibly heavy in my palm. The entire world, the entire universe had shifted beneath my feet, and yet here was my car, waiting patiently. As I reached the driver's side door, I glanced back at the forest. The impenetrable wall of trees seemed to loom, dark and silent, revealing none of its secrets. But I knew what lay beyond, what ancient entities stirred in its depths, what lost souls yearned for release. And I knew that I was no longer just a visitor to these woods. I was connected. A shiver ran down my spine, not of fear, but of profound recognition. The "for now" warning echoed in my mind. This was not over. My purpose, my touch, had been awakened for a reason, and the universe, I suspected, would not let it lie dormant for long. I opened the car door, the familiar scent of stale coffee and old upholstery filling my nostrils. I sank into the driver's seat, letting out a long, shuddering breath. I looked down at my hands, still clutching the smooth gray stones. They no longer glowed, no longer pulsed. They were just ordinary rocks, but I knew better. I started the engine, the familiar roar, a comforting sound of the mundane world. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the path ahead. But as I drove away from the trailhead, away from the silent, watchful forest, I knew I was not truly leaving it behind. The woods and the impossible world beneath them had etched themselves into my very being. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Life, in its stubborn, relentless way, resumed a semblance of normalcy. I returned to my apartment, went back to work, tried to pick up the threads of my ordinary existence, but it was a fragile facade. The world I had known was irrevocably broken, replaced by a new layered reality that only I could perceive. My sleep was haunted by dreams of endless darkness, of crimson light, of swirling echoes crying out in an abyssal void. I would wake up in a cold sweat, the metallic ozone scent from the hollow clinging to my senses, even though I was safe in my bed. The hum of the earth, the deep, resonant vibration of the old ones, was a constant, subtle presence beneath my feet, a low thrum that only I could hear. I stopped hiking in the Oakhaven Gorge, and indeed in any deep wilderness. The allure was still there, stronger than ever, but it was now laced with a profound trepidation. Every patch of ancient forest seemed to shimmer with unseen energies. Every old bridge or secluded dell felt like a potential thin place. I could see them, these subtle distortions in reality, the points where the veil between worlds thinned. And with that sight came a chilling awareness of what might lie beyond. The smooth gray stones, the key, stayed hidden in a small wooden box on my bedside table. I rarely touched them now, but I knew they were there, a tangible link to the impossible. Sometimes, when the hum of the earth grew stronger, or when the shadows in my peripheral vision seemed to deepen, I would reach for them just to feel their reassuring, ordinary weight. My friends noticed a change in me. I was quieter, more distant. My eyes seemed to hold a profound, ancient knowledge that they couldn't fathom. I tried to explain once to my closest friend Sarah about the gorge, about the entity, about being a bridge. She listened patiently, her brow furrowed with concern, convinced I was suffering from severe PTSD or even a psychotic break. After that, I stopped trying. How could I explain a reality that defied all logic, all reason? I found myself increasingly drawn to solitary pursuits, to quiet moments where I could process the immensity of what I had experienced. I spent hours staring out my window, watching the mundane world, but seeing it through new eyes, acutely aware of the unseen layers of energy that permeated everything. The touch was still with me, a part of my being. I couldn't turn it off. It wasn't just about sensing thin places. It was a heightened sensitivity to all forms of energy, to the subtle currents of life itself. I felt the pulse of the city beneath my feet, the faint hum of countless human lives, the underlying tension and flow of a world I now perceived as far more complex than I ever imagined. One evening, several months after my return, I was sitting alone in my apartment, trying to read. The words on the page blurred. The hum of the earth was particularly strong tonight, almost a melodic thrum, vibrant and alive. And then I felt it. A distinct shimmer in the air right in the corner of my living room near the old antique armchair. It was the familiar distortion, the telltale sign of a thin place appearing where there had been none before. My heart leaped into my throat. I froze, every fiber of my being screaming at me to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. The metallic ozone scent, faint but unmistakable, began to creep into the air. It was back, or something was back. The shimmer intensified, becoming a swirling vortex of deep, electric blue light, pulsating with an internal rhythm. It was a portal, just like the one that had opened in the hollow, but here, in my living room. From its depths, two icy blue pinpricks of light appeared, fixed on me. They were familiar, those eyes, radiating an ancient, cold intelligence that I knew all too well. The tall, impossibly thin figure began to emerge from the swirling blue light, its dark form absorbing the ambient light of my living room, casting impossible shadows. It moved with the same eerie, liquid grace, its spindly limbs unfolding from the portal. It was silent, utterly silent save for the faint, almost imperceptible thump that I now knew came from within its own form, a deep, resonant vibration that I felt in my chest. My mind raced, grappling with the impossible. Why here? Why now? I hadn't sought it out. I hadn't wandered into the woods. It had come to me. The entity reached the floor of my living room, its presence radiating the familiar chill that pierced through my clothes and skin, numbing my soul. Its head tilted slightly, those blue eyes never leaving mine, holding me captive. My hand instinctively went to the wooden box on my bedside table, the stones, the key. Its voice resonated in my mind, not the chaotic cacophony of our first encounter, but a clearer, more focused chorus of wind through ancient stone and deep earth groans. The balance it holds, but the path it calls, the echoes they gather, the hunger it awakens. My blood ran cold, the for now warning, it had come true. The hunger was awakening again, and it had found me. "What do you want?" I choked out, my voice barely a whisper, but filled with a desperate resolve. The entity took a slow, deliberate step towards me, its form seeming to stretch, to grow even taller, its blue eyes burning with an unsettling intensity. The metallic, decaying smell became overwhelming, filling my mouth with a bitter taste. The old paths they stir, new echoes they are lost, the bridge it needs you. It gestured with one of its long, skeletal limbs, not at my chest this time, but towards the window, towards the world outside, towards the distant hum of the city. Not only in the deep, but in the places between, you must walk again, you must guide. New echoes, not just in Oakhaven Gorge, but everywhere. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. My touch was not confined to a single forest, a single deep cavern. It was a universal ability, a key to an unseen reality that permeated everything. And the entities, the guardians, needed me to wield it to maintain the balance. The entity took another step, then another, slowly closing the distance between us. Its blue eyes burned with a silent, powerful demand. The portal behind it pulsed, a silent promise of new journeys, new terrifying revelations. I looked at the swirling blue gate in my living room, then at the implacable figure before me, then at the mundane objects of my life. The sofa, the television, the half-read book. They all felt flimsy, unreal, utterly insignificant in the face of this immense, ancient reality that had invaded my home. This was my new life, this was my purpose. The normal world was gone, shattered forever by a single fall in a remote gorge. I was a bridge, a guide, and the hunger, the ancient yearning of the lost, was calling me again. I reached for the wooden box, pulling out the smooth gray stones. They felt warm in my hand, humming with a renewed internal energy. My heart pounded, but it was no longer just fear. It was a strange mix of terror and a terrifying, exhilarating acceptance. I had resisted, I had tried to return to normalcy, but this was my destiny. I looked directly into the blue eyes of the entity. "Where?" I asked, my voice steady, though a tremor still ran through my hand. "Where do I go?" The entity slowly raised its long, spindly arm and pointed, not at the portal in my living room, but at something else. Something unseen, beyond the walls of my apartment, beyond the city, far away. The next thin place it calls, the echoes they await, the bridge it must be walked, again. Its voice resonated, a chorus of whispering wind and shifting earth, carrying a profound sense of urgency and ancient imperative. My journey was far from over. It had just begun, truly. And the mundane world, the world I had so desperately tried to reclaim, was merely a veil, a thin surface over a deeper, more terrifying, and infinitely more compelling reality. I had to go. I had no choice. The entities were here, the hunger was awakening, and I was the bridge. I had to go. I had no choice. The entities were here, the hunger was awakening, and I was the bridge. I took a deep breath, the metallic ozone scent of the portal filling my lungs, mingling with the faint, comforting aroma of my stale coffee from earlier. My apartment, moments ago a sanctuary of normalcy, was now a gateway, its familiar walls humming with an alien energy. The entity stood before me, its spindly arm still raised, pointing not at the swirling blue vortex in my living room, but beyond, a silent decree towards an unseen destination. Where? I asked again, my voice stronger now, laced with a strange, defiant calm. The initial terror was giving way to a cold, hard resolve. If this was my new reality, I would face it head-on. The entity lowered its arm slowly, its blue eyes like distant stars locking onto mine. The current flows east. Follow the pull, a place of many voices, many losses. The old heart, it beats again. East, a place of many voices, many losses. The city. My mind immediately went to the bustling metropolis an hour's drive away, a place I only visited for work or errands. Could a thin place exist amid skyscrapers and concrete? The thought was jarring. My previous experience had been in the primal wilderness of Oakhaven Gorge, a place steeped in ancient earth. To imagine such a profound spiritual rift in the heart of urban sprawl felt wrong. But then the entity had said the hunger was awakening everywhere. The thin places were woven into the fabric of the entire world, not just isolated pockets. The city, with its millions of lives and countless stories, its hidden histories and forgotten corners, its ceaseless energy and undeniable undercurrent of sorrow and longing, made a terrifying kind of sense. I looked down at the smooth gray stones in my hand. They pulsed with a faint, steady warmth, a silent promise of their power. The entity waited, a still, dark silhouette against the swirling blue of the portal, its patience ancient and absolute. There was no time for goodbyes, no time for explanations that no one would understand. My life as I knew it was over. It had been effectively since I fell. This was merely the next chapter. I took one last look at my living room, the comforting clutter of books and blankets, the soft glow of a table lamp. It felt like a lifetime ago that I had been sitting here, blissfully unaware of the cosmic ballet unfolding beneath my very nose. Then I met the entity's gaze. "I'm ready," I said, my voice firm. The entity drifted towards the portal, its form seeming to thin, to stretch, ready to melt back into the ethereal pathway. But before it fully entered, it paused, its head tilting slightly. "The bridge must be whole. Trust the connection. The fear, it feeds the fracture." Then, without another sound, it slipped into the swirling blue light, its form dissolving into countless motes of sapphire dust that vanished into the portal's heart. The metallic ozone scent intensified for a moment, then began to recede. The blue light pulsed, inviting, demanding. I walked towards it, my hand gripping the stones, my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs. Each step was a commitment, a definitive break from everything I had known. As I approached, the portal seemed to shimmer with an almost liquid quality, distorting the familiar patterns of my wallpaper behind it. It hummed with a low, deep thrum, a sound that resonated in my very bones, familiar from my earlier journey. I stepped through. The sensation was identical to the first time. Profound cold, disorienting weightlessness, a sickening lurch that threatened to rip my consciousness from my body. But this time I was prepared. I held onto the stones, focusing on their warmth, using them as an anchor in the swirling chaos. The cacophony of whispers was mercifully absent. This was a passage, not a graveyard of souls. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds, my feet found purchase. I stumbled forward, landing hard on cold, wet pavement. The air was thick with the acrid smell of exhaust fumes, damp earth, and something metallic, almost electric. Above me, obscured by swirling gray clouds, I could just make out the towering silhouettes of unseen buildings. I pushed myself up, my muscles screaming in protest. My body was still recovering from the ordeal in the gorge, and the immediate transition had taken its toll. I was standing in an alleyway, narrow and claustrophobic, reeking of garbage and stale rain. Graffiti-scarred brick walls rose high on either side, meeting a sliver of gray sky far above. The only light came from a flickering neon sign further down the alley, casting an eerie, intermittent red glow on the puddles around my feet. This was not Oakhaven Gorge. This was a SETI. The entity had been right. The cold was different here. Not the ancient, spiritual cold of the deep earth, but a biting, urban chill, damp, and unforgiving. It sank into my bones, a reminder of the raw, concrete reality of this new, thin place. I looked around. The alley was a dead end, cluttered with overflowing dumpsters and discarded crates. There was no visible portal, no shimmering distortion in the brickwork. It had vanished, leaving me stranded in this bleak urban canyon. Just like in the gorge, the path behind me had sealed. My senses, however, were wide awake. The hum of the earth was different here, layered with the electric thrum of the city, a restless, anxious vibration that spoke of millions of interconnected lives. And beneath that, faint but unmistakable, was the subtle distortion, the thinness that marked this place. It wasn't as pronounced as the hollow in the gorge, but it was there, a subtle instability in the air, a faint shimmer that only I could perceive. I closed my eyes, focusing on my touch, reaching out with the stones. The entity had said, a place of many voices, many losses. I had to find the echoes. Almost immediately, the whispers started. Not the overwhelming cacophony of the deep cavern, but distinct, individual voices, fragments of thought bleeding into my mind like faint radio signals. They were closer, more immediate, and utterly heartbreaking. Missed my train just a moment, a man's voice laced with frantic regret. The letter never sent, a woman's choked with sorrow. The last goodbye stolen, a child S, tinged with a devastating innocence. These echoes were different. They weren't ancient, yearning for a forgotten world. They were recent, fresh with the grief of lives cut short, connections severed abruptly. They spoke of the city, of missed chances, of sudden accidents, of lives interrupted. The hunger here was not for the primal earth, but for closure, for connection, for the unfinished business of human existence. I opened my eyes, scanning the dark alleyway. My touch showed me swirling, indistinct masses of dark energy, just like in the deep. But here they were smaller, more numerous, clustered in various spots around the alley, some clinging to the graffiti-scarred walls, others hovering near the overflowing dumpsters. They were like broken fragments of human stories, trapped in this urban purgatory. My heart ached with a familiar, empathic sorrow. These were the lost souls of the city, caught in the thin places of its concrete heart, and I was their guide. "Hello," I whispered, my voice hoarse, swallowed by the oppressive silence of the alley. "Can you hear me?" The nearest swirl of dark energy, clinging to a grimy brick wall, pulsed. The whispers intensified, focusing. alone, forgotten the cold. I extended my hand, holding out the gray stones. Their warmth flared, a soft, ethereal blue light emanating from them, mirroring the entity's eyes. It was fainter here in the ordinary world, but still potent. I can help you, I projected, focusing all my will, all my newfound purpose into the swirling shadow. I can show you the way, the light. Will you come with me? The echo trembled, then slowly, impossibly, began to drift towards my outstretched hand. It was drawn to the warmth, to the light, to the promise of release. As it neared, a profound sadness washed over me, a vivid impression of its last moments, a sudden, jarring impact, the screech of tires, a frantic, desperate thought of someone left behind. This echo was a victim of a hit and run, its life brutally snatched away, its spirit unable to move on, tethered to the place of its demise. I braced myself, fighting the urge to recoil. The sheer weight of human tragedy was overwhelming. The entity's warning echoed in my mind, the fear it feeds the fracture. I had to be strong. I was the bridge. As the shadow form drifted within inches of me, the warmth from the stones flared, and simultaneously an image, clear as a photograph, flashed in my mind. A crumpled photograph of a smiling woman and a small child clutched in a cold, dead hand. It was the echo's last conscious thought, its desperate connection to the world it had lost. "Your family," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "They're waiting for you, they're not forgotten." The echo pulsed, its whispers becoming a torrent of longing. "My son, my wife, I need to tell them." "You can," I said, pouring my intention into the current flowing from the stones. "You can reach them, through the light, through the gate." I looked towards the general direction of east, towards the distant hum of the city center. There was no visible gate here, no monumental archway of crimson light, but I knew there had to be one. The old heart, it beats again. The central thin place, the nexus for the city's lost. "We need to find the heart of the city," I told the echo, projecting my intention. "The true gate. Can you feel a pull, a direction?" The echo, now seemingly attached to the gentle current from my hand, pulsed, indicating a subtle leaning within the confines of the alley. It was a faint, almost imperceptible shift, but it was there, a memory of a path, a resonance of its final destination. I followed its subtle pull, stumbling through the debris-strewn alley. The chorus of other whispers, the myriad of lost souls, seemed to recede slightly as I moved, giving us a wide berth, or perhaps acknowledging the presence of a guide. The echo led me out of the alley onto a bustling street. The transition was jarring. Suddenly, I was amidst the noise and chaos of a late-night city. Headlights streamed past, taxis honked, music blared from unseen bars. People hurried by, their faces illuminated by the passing cars, their lives interwoven in a complex, indifferent tapestry. And through it all I walked, an invisible guide for an unseen soul. My touch was overwhelmed by the sheer sensory input, but the echo clung to my hand, its presence a constant, chilling tether. The thin places were everywhere here. Every dark doorway, every bustling intersection, every lonely bench seemed to hum with a subtle distortion, a vulnerability in the fabric of reality. I could feel the layered energies, the constant movement of human lives, and beneath it all, the profound sadness of the lost. The city itself was a giant, living organism, constantly vibrating with activity, but also with countless unnoticed tragedies. I began to understand what the entity meant by many voices, many losses. The sheer volume of human experience, of joy and despair, of connection and severance, created a powerful, restless energy that fueled the thin places. The echo guided me through a maze of backstreets, past brightly lit storefronts and dark, silent warehouses. The metallic, electric scent of the city mingled with the faint, decaying smell of the echo, a strange, urban supernatural blend. The further we went, the more the background hum of the city seemed to shift, becoming deeper, more resonant. And then I felt it, a profound gravitational pull, a familiar pressure in my chest. Not the earth growl of the gorge, but a deeper, more ancient vibration emanating from somewhere at the very heart of the city. The old heart, it beats again. We emerged into a vast, open square. It was a place of historical significance, marked by an imposing monument, surrounded by old, majestic buildings whose architecture spoke of centuries of human endeavor. Even in the pre-dawn gloom, it was an impressive sight, but for me, it was more. Here, the thinness was palpable. The air shimmered with an almost visible distortion, like heat haze over asphalt on a summer day. The hum of the city was replaced by a low, deep thrum, a rhythmic thump-thump-thump that resonated not just in my ears, but in my very bones. This was the city's heart, its true gate. And like in the deep cavern, echoes were gathered here. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of them, swirling around the ancient monument, drawn to the profound energy of this place. Their whispers were a deafening, unified chorus of urban despair, a symphony of longing for lives unlived, words unspoken, connections broken. Unlike the deep cavern, there was no crimson light, no colossal archway carved by the earth itself. Instead, in the very center of the square where the monument stood, the air shimmered with a profound internal darkness. It wasn't a solid structure, but a churning vortex of shadow, a silent maw that seemed to absorb the ambient light, radiating an immense gravitational pull that tugged at my very being. This was the true gate of the city, hidden in plain sight, a tear in the urban fabric. And then I saw them. Not the ancient watchers of the deep, but others. Taller, more refined, their dark forms blending seamlessly with the long shadows cast by the buildings and the monument. Their blue eyes burned with the familiar, chilling intensity, but these entities seemed different. Their forms were less attenuated, almost solid, wearing what looked like long, flowing robes that absorbed the light. They were guardians, shepherds, like the one that had guided me, but adapted to this urban environment, their presence adding another layer of unsettling power to the scene. There were perhaps 8 of them, arranged in a silent circle around the churning vortex, their gaze fixed on the swirling echoes and, most disturbingly, on me. My echo, still clinging to my outstretched hand, trembled, its whispers becoming agitated. The keepers, they watch the crossing. The keepers, they were waiting for me, waiting for my touch to complete the ritual, to open the way. I approached the vortex, my echo still tethered to my hand, the gray stones radiating a steady warmth. The air here was thick with energy, a tangible pressure that threatened to squeeze the breath from my lungs. The invisible heart of the city pulsed with a slow, powerful rhythm demanding release. The hunger was here too, not the primal hunger of the earth, but the collective hunger of countless lost human experiences yearning for completion. One of the keepers, taller and seemingly older than the others, its blue eyes burning with an ancient wisdom, drifted forward, stopping directly before me. Its voice echoed in my mind, a clear, resonant chorus of wind through skyscraper canyons and the deep thrum of subway lines. You have come, the bridge, you carry it, the echoes they gather, the hunger awaits. It gestured with a long, spindly arm towards the churning vortex and then slowly towards my hand, towards the stones. The key, it unlocks the path. The heart, it binds the way. Bring them home. Bring them home, that was my task, to guide the echoes through the true gate back to wherever they belonged. But how? And what was on the other side of this urban gate, and what would it cost me this time? I looked at the swirling vortex. It was a churning mass of pure darkness, absorbing all light, radiating an immense gravitational pull that tugged at my very being. This was not just a passage. It was a gateway to another realm, perhaps one where the fragmented human souls could find peace. The city's invisible heart throbbed, the rhythmic thumping growing louder, more insistent. It was no longer a demand, it was a desperate plea, a raw, primal cry from the depths of human sorrow. The hunger was truly growing. I knew with an unsettling certainty what I had to do. The stones in my hand, the key, were meant to be used. They were not just for perceiving the echoes, but for guiding them, for focusing my touch. I looked at my echo, still clinging to my hand, its faint form now pulsing with a fragile hope. Then I looked at the multitude of other echoes, swirling, yearning, waiting, and then at the keepers, silent, expectant, their blue eyes fixed on me. The bridge, though it is fractured, I repeated the words the first entity had spoken. I can mend it. I raised my hand, the one clutching the smooth gray stones. The warmth flared, spreading through my arm, through my chest, radiating outward. It wasn't just heat. It was a pure, potent energy, a life force I hadn't known I possessed. My touch. I focused all my will, all my newfound understanding on the swirling vortex, on the true gate of the city. I pictured the broken bridge, the fragmented paths, and in my mind I began to weave them together, using the energy of the stones as my loom, my touch as the thread. As I concentrated, the gray stones in my hand began to glow, not with warmth, but with a soft, ethereal blue light mirroring the eyes of the keepers. The light pulsed in rhythm with my own heartbeat, a steady, defiant thrum against the overwhelming thumping of the city's heart. And then I extended my hand towards the churning vortex, towards the swirling darkness of the true gate. The blue light from the stones flowed out not as a beam, but as a shimmering, translucent pathway of energy stretching across the space between me and the portal. It was a bridge of pure light, woven from my own essence and the power of the stones, spanning the urban abyss. As the light bridge solidified, a collective gasp, a unified sigh of hope, swept through the square from the gathered echoes. The swirling darkness of the vortex seemed to dim slightly, subsumed by the new blue light. The city's heart throb quieted, softening to a low, anticipatory rumble. Even the keepers seemed to hold their breath, their blue eyes widening fractionally. My echo, still attached to my hand, trembled, and then, with an almost imperceptible shift, it began to flow forward, drawn inexorably towards the blue light bridge. It was like a river of shadow finding its course. "Go," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion but firm. "Go home." And as it touched the light bridge, something extraordinary happened. The echo's shadowy form began to shimmer, to brighten, gaining definition. Its fragmented whispers coalesced into a single, clear voice filled with an indescribable relief and love. Tell my son I love him, thank you for the way, for the light. And then, as it moved onto the bridge, it dissolved. Not vanished, but transformed, dissipating into countless shimmering motes of blue light that flowed swiftly along the bridge into the heart of the true gate and disappeared into the deeper darkness beyond. It was a gentle, beautiful release, a return. A profound sense of exhaustion washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of exhilaration. I had done it. I had guided an echo home, even here in the cold, hard heart of the city. The energy radiating from the stones in my hand remained strong, the blue light pathway still stretched before the gate, and the remaining echoes, hundreds of them, were stirring. They surged forward, a tidal wave of yearning presences, drawn by the newly mended bridge, by the visible pathway to their forgotten peace. One by one, they began to flow onto the bridge of light, each one shimmering, gaining definition, their fragmented whispers coalescing into words of gratitude and relief, before dissolving into light and passing through the gate. It was an astonishing, heartbreaking spectacle, a procession of the lost finding their way back to completion. The keepers remained silent, their blue eyes fixed on the unfolding miracle, their forms radiating a deep, ancient satisfaction. The city's heartthrob was now a soft, content hum vibrating through the square. The hunger was being sated, not with sacrifice, but with release. But as more and more echoes flowed across the bridge, I felt the toll. The energy flowing from me through the stones was immense. My body trembled, not from cold or fear, but from the sheer exertion. My head swam and my vision began to blur at the edges. The blue light from the stones flickered, threatening to dim. I knew I couldn't sustain this indefinitely. My human limits were rapidly approaching. There were still so many echoes, a seemingly endless tide of them waiting to cross. The oldest keeper, the one that had spoken to me, drifted closer. Its voice resonated in my mind, a comforting hum now rather than a demand. You are strong, the bridge it holds, but the path it is long, the gate it demands much. It gestured again with its spindly arm, not at the echoes, but at me, specifically at my chest, over my heart. The heart of the deep, the bridge within, you give and you receive. Draw from the other side. You are the conduit. You are the balance. Draw from the other side, receive. What did that mean? I was giving everything I had. But to receive, I looked at the shimmering blue light bridge reaching into the infinite darkness of the true gate. Was it telling me to draw energy from there, from the very place I was sending the echoes? It was a terrifying thought, a reversal of the flow. As if sensing my hesitation, the keeper extended its hand, and this time its dark, absorbing fingers, devoid of light, gently touched my forehead. It was the same cold, tingling sensation as before, but this time the torrent of feelings was different. It wasn't memories of the gorge or the hunger of the old ones or the fragmented sorrows of the city. It was a profound sense of peace, of wholeness, of belonging. I felt the interconnectedness of everything, the subtle energies that flowed between all living things, the gentle rhythm of the cosmos. I felt the immense, ancient power of the city itself, not as a source of threat, but as a vast, benevolent reservoir of energy, pulsing with life, with human stories and collective consciousness. And I felt the echoes not as lost souls, but as threads of consciousness, returning to the weave, completing a tapestry. And from that sense of connection, a new kind of energy flowed into me. It wasn't the frantic surge of adrenaline, but a calm, steady, profound power, a deep wellspring of vitality that began to replenish my depleted reserves. It was the balance. I was giving, but the act of giving, of mending the bridge, was also connecting me to the deeper currents of the city, allowing me to draw strength from the vast, ancient network of life and energy that permeated this hidden world. My vision cleared, the trembling in my body ceased. The blue light from the stones and the bridge solidified, burning brighter than before. The steady hum of the city's heart intensified, not with hunger, but with a deep, resonant satisfaction. I looked at the endless stream of echoes flowing across the bridge, each one finding its release, its peace. I was no longer just a lost hiker. I was the bridge itself, a living conduit, holding the balance between worlds. My fear had not vanished entirely, but it had transformed into a profound sense of awe and purpose. I was part of something ancient, something far grander and more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. Hours passed, or perhaps moments. Time was an irrelevant concept in this place. The stream of echoes began to thin, slowly, gradually. The vast multitude that had awaited passage dwindled. My body, though replenished by the flow of energy, still felt the strain of such immense spiritual work. Finally, the last echo, a faint, almost transparent shimmer, flowed across the bridge, dissolving into light as it passed through the gate. The chorus of whispers, which had been constant, now faded into a profound, resonant silence. The swirling darkness of the vortex dimmed, and the blue light bridge, no longer needed, began to waver, to shimmer, to withdraw. As the light bridge dissipated, the oldest keeper drifted forward again, its blue eyes now softened, filled with a gentle gratitude. The bridge it is mended, the echoes they are home, the hunger it sleeps. It paused, then its gaze fell upon the stones in my hand. The blue light within them had faded, leaving them once again smooth and gray, but they felt different now, imbued with an inner resonance. The key it has served, the balance is restored for now. The last two words hung in the air, a subtle warning within the quiet. For now, this was not an end, but a temporary reprieve. The thin places would always exist. The hunger could always awaken again. The keeper then turned, its form blending seamlessly back into the deeper shadows from which it had emerged, followed by the other guardians. The square was silent once more, save for the low, contented hum of the city, a deep, satisfied rumble that resonated through the profound quiet. The churning vortex from the true gate pulsed softly, no longer demanding, but simply existing, a silent scar on the urban landscape. I stood alone before the monument, the smooth gray stones still clutched in my hand. The absolute darkness of the true gate felt less terrifying now, imbued with a new, ancient familiarity. I had walked through the impossible, become a bridge between worlds, and lived. But where did I go from here? The gate was behind me, the echoes were home, and the keepers were gone. The way back to my apartment was not visible. The portal that had brought me here had sealed. I was still in the heart of the city, in this profoundly thin place. My journey was far from over. I had fulfilled my purpose for now, but I was still lost, still trapped, still alone. And the profound silence that had settled upon the square after the release of so many souls felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken truths. I had learned the rules of this impossible world, but navigating it remained a mystery. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to filter through the skyscrapers, painting the sky in soft hues of gray and rose. The city slowly began to stir. The distant sound of a garbage truck, the faint hum of an early morning bus, the first chirping of birds, the mundane world was waking up. I looked down at the smooth gray stones in my hand. They felt heavier now, imbued with the weight of two impossible journeys, two acts of mending. My touch was still active, a profound hum beneath my skin, allowing me to perceive the subtle energies of the waking city. The thinness of the square was still there, a faint shimmer, a lingering echo of the great work that had just been performed. But how did I get back? The entity had simply pointed and then left me to my task. There was no clear instruction for returning home, for closing the loop. I couldn't just wander the streets, waiting for another portal to spontaneously appear. I tried to focus my touch again, not on echoes, but on currents, on pathways back. I pictured my apartment, the quiet sanctuary I had left behind. I tried to mentally project my awareness to find a resonance, a connection. It was harder here, amidst the overwhelming, cacophonous energy of the city, than it had been in the deep earth. After several minutes of intense concentration, a faint flicker, not light but a subtle pull. It was incredibly diffused, almost imperceptible, emanating from somewhere nearby, perhaps a few blocks away. It felt like a faint thread stretching through the maze of streets and buildings, leading away from the square. I began to walk, following the thread. My body was still aching, but the replenished energy flowed steadily through me, sustaining me. The city was coming to life around me. Cars began to fill the streets, their engines rumbling. People bundled in coats hurried past, coffee cups in hand, their faces drawn with the weariness of early mornings. They were oblivious, utterly oblivious to the profound forces that had just played out in their midst. I moved like a ghost among them, an invisible participant in a world I no longer truly belonged to. I could feel their energies, their emotions, the subtle currents of their lives woven into the fabric of the city. My touch was a constant, overwhelming sensory input, a new lens through which I perceived everything. The thread led me down a narrow side street, past old brick buildings and forgotten storefronts. The pull grew stronger here, more defined. It felt familiar, a faint echo of the same energy that had brought me to the gorge and then to this city square. I turned a corner and there it was. Not a swirling blue portal this time, but a faint shimmer in the air, localized in an abandoned bus shelter, its glass panels shattered, its metal frame rusting. The familiar metallic ozone scent was present, faint but unmistakable. This was a thin place, a point of entry and exit, hidden in the mundane decay of urban infrastructure. I stepped towards it, my heart pounding with a mix of trepidation and anticipation. This was the way back for now. The cycle would continue. As I reached the bus shelter, the shimmer intensified, becoming a localized distortion like a heat haze on a summer road, but shimmering with a faint, internal blue light that only I could see. I pressed the stones against the shimmering air. My touch surged, flowing from my heart through my arm, into the stones, and then into the air itself. The distortion expanded, becoming a doorway of rippling energy about my height. It hummed with a low, resonant thrum, a silent invitation. I took a deep breath, filled with the pungent scent of city grime and ozone, and stepped through. The sensation was instantaneous. The disorienting rush, the profound cold, the feeling of falling through an infinite void. But this time it was quicker, more controlled, as if my touch was now more adept at navigating these ethereal pathways. I stumbled forward, landing back in my living room, sprawling onto my rug. The portal behind me immediately vanished, leaving no trace. The air still held a faint tang of ozone, but it quickly dissipated, replaced by the familiar, comforting smell of my apartment. I pushed myself up, my body aching, my head swimming. I was back. The sun was streaming through my window, painting my living room in warm, golden light. It was morning. My journey, which had felt like days, had lasted only a few hours in linear time. I looked at my hands, still clutching the smooth gray stones. They were warm, humming with a steady inner resonance. My jeans were torn, my jacket was dirty, and my face, when I caught a glimpse of it in the reflection of the dark television screen, was streaked with grime and exhaustion. But I was here. I was whole. I sank onto my sofa, pulling off my dirty boots, letting the weight of everything wash over me. The world outside hummed with the familiar sounds of city life, utterly oblivious. I had guided 2 sets of echoes home. I had mended the bridge twice. I had faced the entities and survived. But the for now still echoed in my mind. This was not an end. It was a new beginning. My life as I knew it was irrevocably over. I was a bridge, a guide, a conduit between worlds. And I knew with a chilling certainty that the call would come again. My touch was awakened, and the ancient forces that stirred beneath the world would ensure I would never truly rest. The hunger would always return, and I would always be needed. I closed my eyes, letting the sounds of the waking world wash over me. The birds chirping, the distant siren, the rumble of traffic, all normal, all utterly transformed. I was here, but I was also somewhere else always. The world for me was forever fractured, layered, a tapestry of visible and invisible threads. My existence was now bound to the balance, to the ceaseless task of guiding the lost. And the entities, silent and watchful, were out there, waiting for the next thin place to call, for the next awakening of the hunger. I had to be ready. I had no choice. I closed my eyes, letting the sounds of the waking world wash over me. The birds chirping, the distant siren, the rumble of traffic, all normal, all utterly transformed. I was here, but I was also somewhere else always. The world for me was forever fractured, layered, a tapestry of visible and invisible threads. My existence was now bound to the balance, to the ceaseless task of guiding the lost. And the entities, silent and watchful, were out there, waiting for the next thin place to call, for the next awakening of the hunger. I had to be ready. I had no choice. The exhaustion was a heavy cloak, wrapping around me, pulling me into its comforting, dark embrace. But sleep, when it finally came, was restless. The hum of the earth, the thrum of the city, the faint whispers of echoes still lingering at the edges of my perception, they were all interwoven into a complex symphony that played constantly in my mind. I woke often heart-pounding, convinced I could still smell the metallic ozone of the portals, or the damp earth of the gorge. My apartment, once a refuge, now felt like a temporary stopover, a waiting room before the next inevitable summons. Days blurred into weeks. I tried to maintain the semblance of my old life, but it was an increasingly transparent charade. Work became a meaningless blur of tasks, my mind constantly elsewhere, sifting through the layers of energy that permeated the office building. The faint echoes of past conversations clinging to the walls, the subtle emotional currents of my colleagues. It was like living with an endlessly chattering crowd in my head, a crowd only I could hear. My friends grew more concerned. Sarah especially kept pressing me, her kind eyes full of worry. "You're not yourself," she'd say, reaching for my hand. "Are you seeing someone, a therapist? This isn't healthy." I would just offer a vague smile, unable to share the impossible truth that consumed me. The gulf between my reality and theirs widened with each passing day. The gray stones, the key, became a constant companion. They weren't always in my hand, but they were always nearby, usually in my pocket, their smooth warmth a silent reassurance. I no longer feared them. They were an extension of me, a tool, a grounding rod in a world that constantly threatened to overwhelm my senses. My touch was now fully integrated, a part of my nervous system. I didn't just perceive thin places or echoes, I felt the very fabric of reality, the subtle ebb and flow of energy in every object, every living thing. It was exhausting, but also strangely beautiful, like seeing the hidden gears of the universe turning. The entities, the guardians, remained silent, unseen. There was no new summons, no swirling blue portal appearing in my living room. The silence was almost more unsettling than their presence. It was a reprieve, but a temporary one, pregnant with anticipation. I knew it was only a matter of time. I spent hours researching, poring over ancient texts, folklore, and obscure scientific theories, searching for anything that might shed light on my experiences. I dove into quantum physics, theories of parallel dimensions, forgotten myths of crossroads and spirit guides. I found tantalizing fragments, echoes of truth woven into legends, but never a complete picture, never a clear explanation for what I had become. The words bridge and guide appeared frequently, always in hushed, reverent tones, always connected to the liminal, to the spaces between. Then one crisp autumn evening, it happened again. I was in my apartment, staring out the window at the deepening twilight, watching the city lights flicker to life. The hum of the earth, the thrum of the city, was a steady, almost comforting presence. But then, a subtle shift. A new vibration, deeper, more ancient, began to assert itself, cutting through the urban symphony. It was a familiar feeling, a premonition that tightened my chest. My gaze drifted to the corner of my living room. No shimmering portal, not yet, but the air there felt different, denser, crackling with an unseen energy. The metallic ozone scent, faint but unmistakable, began to creep into the room. My heart hammered. This was it. I stood, my hand instinctively going to the wooden box where the stones usually rested, only to remember they were already in my pocket. Their warmth spread through my palm, a steadying presence. The corner of the room began to shimmer, a subtle distortion like heat haze. It expanded, deepening into the familiar swirling vortex of deep, electric blue light pulsating with an internal rhythm. It was a portal, opening again in my home. And from its depths, two icy blue pinpricks of light appeared, fixed on me. The tall, impossibly thin figure began to emerge, its dark form absorbing the ambient light, casting impossible shadows. It was the same entity, the same guardian that had first appeared in my living room, its movements fluid and silent. It reached the floor, its presence radiating the familiar chill that pierced through my clothes and skin. Its head tilted slightly, those blue eyes never leaving mine. Its voice resonated in my mind, a clear, powerful chorus of wind through ancient stone and deep earth groans, imbued with a new, urgent tremor. The balance shifts, a new fracture deep and old, the silence it breaks, the hunger it screams. My blood ran cold, the silence breaks, the hunger screams. This sounded worse than before. Where? I asked, my voice steady, no longer trembling with the raw terror of our first encounter. Where do I go? The entity took a slow, deliberate step towards me, its form seeming to stretch, to grow even taller. The metallic, decaying smell became overwhelming. West, beyond the mountains, where the earth sleeps and dreams, a place of deep roots and forgotten tears, the old growth, it withers, the guardians, they fail. West, beyond the mountains, that was a vast, wild territory hundreds of miles away, a place of deep roots and forgotten tears, the old growth withers. This sounded like a wilderness, thin place again, but one even more ancient and profound than Oak Haven Gorge. and the guardians, they fail. That was a truly terrifying prospect. If the guardians were failing, what did that mean for the balance for me? The entity gestured with one of its long, skeletal limbs not at the portal, but at the general direction of west, through my apartment wall, through the city, towards the distant, unseen mountains. The corruption it spreads, not from without, but from within, the core it rots, you must cleanse. Cleanse, the word hung heavy in the air, weighted with an ominous finality. It wasn't just about guiding lost souls anymore. It was about something deeper, something fundamental. Corruption. Rot. What could possibly corrupt an ancient, thin place to such an extent that its guardians were failing? I looked at the swirling blue gate in my living room, then back at the implacable figure. My mind raced, grappling with the enormity of this new task. Cleanse what? How do I cleanse a thin place? The entity's voice resonated, a more complex, intricate chorus now, like crumbling stone and weeping roots. The essence, it is tainted. The heart, it bleeds. Your touch, it discerns. Your will, it purifies. You are the living current, the anchor in the storm. Living current, anchor in the storm. This wasn't just about opening a path for echoes. It was about actively engaging with the thin place itself, with its very essence. It felt like a far more dangerous, far more invasive task. I reached for the gray stones in my pocket, pulling them out. They felt warm, humming with a renewed internal energy, a quiet anticipation. My heart pounded, but beneath the fear there was a strange, undeniable pull, a sense of destiny. This was why I had been chosen. This was the true extent of my purpose. I looked directly into the blue eyes of the entity. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady. The entity melted back towards the portal, its form seeming to thin, ready to dissolve. But before it fully entered, it paused, its head tilting slightly. The darkness, it clings, it tests the core. Trust the light within, beware the whispers of despair. Then, without another sound, it slipped into the swirling blue light, its form dissolving into countless motes of sapphire dust that vanished into the portal's heart. The metallic ozone scent intensified for a moment, then began to recede. The blue light pulsed, inviting, demanding. I walked towards it, my hand gripping the stones, my mind focused. This was beyond anything I had imagined, beyond lost souls, beyond mere guidance. This was about healing, about restoring balance to something ancient and fundamental. I stepped through. The sensation was more intense this time, almost violent. The profound cold, the disorienting weightlessness, the sickening lurch, it was all magnified, as if the portal itself was struggling against some unseen force. The cacophony of whispers was not present, but a new, unsettling sensation washed over me. A deep, pervasive feeling of dread, of decay. It felt like falling through corrupted space, through something fundamentally wrong. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds, my feet found purchase. I stumbled forward, landing hard on damp, spongy earth. The air was thick with the scent of damp soil, rotting leaves, and an almost sickly sweet, cloying aroma like decaying flowers mixed with something metallic. It was utterly unlike the crisp, sweet air of Oakhaven Gorge or the acrid exhaust of the city. This smell was wrong. I pushed myself up, my muscles screaming in protest. My body was still recovering from the previous ordeal, and this new transition had taxed me even further. I was standing in a forest, but it was a forest unlike any I had ever seen. Ancient trees, immense and gnarled, towered above me, their branches forming a dense, interlocking canopy that blocked out almost all sunlight. What little light filtered through was a sickly, pale green, casting the entire scene in an unnatural, ghostly glow. The ground was covered in a thick layer of black, decaying leaves and strangely vibrant, phosphorescent fungi that glowed with an eerie, purplish light. The trees themselves were twisted, some of their trunks visibly rotting, oozing a thick black sap that shimmered with the same unsettling purple hue. This was not a healthy forest. This was a forest in the throes of a profound sickness. The cold here was spiritual, an icy dread that seeped into my bones, far more potent than the chill of the gorge or the city. It was the cold of encroaching death, of vital energy being slowly choked. I looked around. There was no visible portal, no shimmering distortion. It had vanished, leaving me stranded in this profoundly corrupted wilderness. My senses, however, were wide awake. The hum of the earth here was not a comforting thrum, but a slow, ragged pulse like a dying heartbeat. And beneath that, permeating everything, was the thinness, the subtle distortion in the air, magnified by the decay. It felt like a wound in reality, actively bleeding. I closed my eyes, focusing on my touch, reaching out with the stones. The entity had said, a place of deep roots and forgotten tears. The old growth, it withers. Almost immediately, the whispers started, but these were different. They weren't fragments of human thought or ancient yearnings. These were deeper, more primal. The sound of groaning roots, of cracking bark, of weeping leaves, the cries of the forest itself in agony. And mingled with that, a new kind of echo. Not clear, defined entities like the lost souls, but indistinct, swirling masses of shadowy energy that seemed to writhe and contort. They radiated not sorrow, but a profound, malevolent despair, a corrosive energy that seemed to actively feed on the life force of the forest. These were the whispers of despair the entity had warned me about. I opened my eyes, scanning the eerie, purple-tinged shadows. My touch showed me countless swirling masses of this dark, corrupting energy clinging to the rotting tree trunks, swirling around the glowing fungi, seeping into the very soil. They weren't lost souls seeking release. They were fragments of raw, destructive despair, actively poisoning the thin place. This was the corruption. My heart ached with a profound, empathic horror. The forest was dying, its spiritual essence being devoured by this insidious rot, and the guardians were failing. "Hello," I whispered, my voice hoarse, swallowed by the oppressive silence of the dying woods. "What is this place?" The nearest swirl of dark energy, clinging to an ancient, oozing tree, pulsed. The whispers intensified, focusing, but they weren't words. They were raw emotions. Fear, anger, hopelessness, despair, amplified and distorted, battering my mind. It was a cacophony of negative emotion, suffocating and overwhelming. I extended my hand, holding out the gray stones. Their warmth flared, a soft, ethereal blue light emanating from them, mirroring the entity's eyes. But here, the light seemed to struggle against the pervasive gloom, flickering like a dying ember. "I'm here to help," I projected, focusing all my will, all my newfound purpose into the swirling shadow. "I'm here to cleanse." The echo of despair recoiled, shrinking slightly from the blue light, its form hissing with an unheard sound. This was not like the lost souls of the city or the gorge. This was actively hostile. It fed on the decay, on the suffering. The entity's warning echoed in my mind. The darkness, it clings. It tests the core. Trust the light within. Beware the whispers of despair. This was not a matter of simply guiding. This was a confrontation. I braced myself, fighting the urge to recoil. The sheer weight of this corrosive despair was overwhelming. It seeped into my mind, whispering doubts, fears, feeding on my own anxieties. You are weak, you are nothing, this forest is doomed, you will fail, you will die here. I focused on the warmth of the stones, on the steady blue light they emitted. I was the bridge, I was the living current. I had to be stronger than this. No, I said aloud, my voice firm, cutting through the insidious whispers. I won't fail, I am the bridge, I will not let this forest die. I directed the blue light from the stones directly at the nearest swirl of despair. It recoiled further, writhing as if in pain. It was being purged, but the effort was immense. The resistance was palpable, like pushing against an invisible, malevolent wall. And then I felt them, the guardians. They were different here, not the tall, dark figures I had encountered before. These were ancient, colossal presences interwoven with the very fabric of the old growth. They were the trees themselves, or spirits of the trees. Their forms, when my touch perceived them, were like immense, silent watchers, their ancient boughs reaching for the sickly green sky, their roots anchored deep in the tainted earth. But they were dim, their light flickering, their presence barely holding back the tide of corruption. They were failing, just as the entity had warned. Their blue eyes, though present, were almost completely swallowed by the gloom, flickering like dying stars. One of them, an immense gnarled oak whose bark seemed to weep the black, purple-tinged sap, pulsed with a faint, sorrowful energy. Its voice resonated in my mind, a slow, aching groan of cracking wood and ancient, suffering roots. The rot, it deepens, we fade, we cannot hold. The core, it bleeps with poison, free us or perish with us. Free us, my task was clear. I had to cleanse the core, the source of the corruption, to free the guardians and save the forest. But how? The entity had said, my touch discerns, my will purifies. I looked around the dying forest, at the pervasive gloom, the endless whispers of despair. This wasn't a contained anomaly like the gorge or the city square. This was a sprawling infection, radiating from a central point. I needed to find the source. I closed my eyes, focusing my touch, extending it further than I ever had before, seeking the deepest, darkest concentration of the corruption, the heart of the rot. The energy surged from the stones, through my arm, out into the forest. It was like sending out a sonar pulse, mapping the spiritual landscape. The whispers of despair intensified, pushing back, trying to overwhelm me, but I held firm, anchored by the stones, by my unwavering will. And then I found it, a profound, black abyss of despair, far deeper, far more concentrated than anything else in the forest. It was a gravitational well of pure corruption, drawing all light, all life, all hope into itself. It was the source. It was the core. The entity's voice, a distant memory, echoed, not from without, but from within, the core it rots. The core was not a physical location, not a specific tree or rock. It was the deepest, thin place in this forest, the nexus of its life force, now utterly corrupted. And it was radiating out, infecting everything. I opened my eyes, my gaze fixed on the direction where I had sensed the core. It was deeper in the forest, in an even more oppressive darkness. I had to go there. Guardians, I projected, focusing on the immense, fading presences around me. Show me the way, guide me to the core. The ancient oak pulsed, and a faint, almost invisible current of energy, like a shimmering stream in the darkness, began to flow from its base, weaving through the corrupted trees, leading deeper into the dying woods. It was a lifeline, a thread of light in the pervasive gloom. "Thank you," I whispered and began to follow, stepping cautiously over the squishy, rotting earth, my boots sinking into the phosphorescent fungi. The whispers of despair intensified with every step, growing louder, more insistent, battering my mind with images of failure, of decay, of hopelessness. "You cannot, you are mortal, this is ancient, you will break, join us, despair." I focused on the blue light of the stones, on the faint current flowing from the ancient guardian. I was the anchor. I was the light within. I pressed forward, forcing my mind to reject the insidious whispers, to cling to my purpose. The journey was slow, arduous. The air grew heavier, thick with the sickly sweet smell of rot and the palpable pressure of pervasive despair. The trees became more grotesque, more twisted, their black sap weeping like blood. The purple fungi pulsed with a brighter, more aggressive light, almost malevolent in its intensity. Finally, I reached a clearing. It wasn't a clearing of light and open sky, but a vast circular expanse of absolute darkness, even darker than the surrounding corrupted forest. No trees grew here. The ground was black, devoid of all life, shimmering with an unearthly, oily sheen. In the very center of this wasteland, a gaping maw, a tear in the fabric of reality, pulsed with an internal darkness that seemed to absorb all ambient light, radiating the profound, crushing despair I had sensed. This was the core, this was the source of the corruption. And surrounding it, silently watching, were new entities. They were not the tall, dark, graceful figures of the other thin places. These were more monstrous, their forms vaguely humanoid but grotesquely distorted, writhing and shifting, like beings made of living shadow and despair. Their eyes, though blue, glowed with a feral, malevolent light, burning with an almost animalistic hunger. There were at least 5 of them, arranged in a silent, menacing circle around the gaping maw of the core, their gaze fixed on me, radiating an intense, active hostility. They were the agents of the corruption, the true guardians of this corrupted, thin place. My blood ran cold. These were not the benevolent, guiding entities. These were something else entirely, something ancient and truly evil. The whispers of despair emanating from the maw of the core swelled into a deafening roar, a unified voice of pure malice and nihilism. "Intruder, weak flesh, this is our domain, join the decay, become us, despair, despair, despair." The new entities, the corruption guardians, began to move, their shadowy forms rippling and contorting, slowly closing the circle around me. Their blue eyes burned with an icy, predatory gleam. They were not just watching, they were preparing to strike. The entity's warning echoed again, sharp and clear. "The darkness, it clings, it tests the core. Trust the light within, beware the whispers of despair. And then you must cleanse." I was alone, surrounded by pure malice, facing something far beyond my comprehension. But I was also the bridge. I held the key. I had to cleanse this. I raised my hand, clutching the smooth gray stones. Their warmth flared, the blue light from them shining brighter than ever before, cutting through the oppressive darkness of the clearing. It was a defiant beacon against the encroaching gloom. As the light from the stones intensified, the corruption guardians hissed, recoiling slightly, their forms flickering as if in pain. They were vulnerable to this light. My touch and my essence was their antithesis. "I am the bridge," I stated, my voice echoing in the vast, silent clearing, imbued with an unwavering resolve that surprised even myself. "And I am here to cleanse this place." I focused all my will, all my energy, all the power of the stones on the gaping maw of the corrupted core. I pictured the vibrant, living forest I had seen in Oakhaven Gorge, the profound balance of the deep earth, the pure light of the souls passing through the city gate. I pictured healing, purity, restoration. The blue light from the stones surged, not just as a pathway, but as a radiating wave of pure energy, washing over the clearing. It pushed back against the whispers of despair, silenced the malevolent roar from the core. The corruption guardians shrieked, a sound that ripped through my mind as the blue light touched them. Their shadowy forms began to dissolve, to dissipate like smoke in the wind, their feral blue eyes dimming, extinguishing. They were being purged, consumed by the light. But the core remained, the gaping maw pulsed, its internal darkness resisting, sucking at the light, trying to draw it in and corrupt it. The sickening, sweet smell intensified, sickening me. I took a deep breath, pushing past the pain, past the fear. The entity's words came to me. "Your touch, it discerns. Your will, it purifies. You are the living current, the anchor in the storm." My touch discerned the corruption. Now my will had to purify. I extended my arm, pointing the stones directly at the maw. I focused on the profound connection I had felt in the city, the ability to draw energy from the other side. I was a conduit. I was the balance. This corrupted, thin place needed healing, not just guiding. It needed a new source of energy, a pure current to flush out the rot. I closed my eyes, picturing the vibrant energy of the living earth, the ancient, untainted wisdom of the world. I opened myself, becoming a channel. The blue light from the stones surged outwards, not just light, but a torrent of pure, unadulterated life force streaming from me through the stones and directly into the gaping maw of the core. It was an overwhelming sensation, like becoming a living river. My body trembled violently, every cell vibrating with the immense power flowing through me. It was everything I had and more. The maw of the core shrieked, a sound of pure agony as the pure energy slammed into it. The internal darkness began to writhe, to struggle, to push back. The sickening, sweet smell intensified, a desperate, final burst of corruption. For a terrifying moment, it felt like the core was winning, trying to pull me in, to corrupt my essence, to turn me into another agent of despair. The whispers roared, attacking my mind, dredging up every fear, every doubt, every moment of sorrow I had ever experienced. "Join us, give up, there is no hope, you are nothing, let go." But I held fast. I was the anchor. I was the bridge. I remembered the feeling of peace in the city, the profound satisfaction of guiding the echoes home, the ancient, quiet strength of the true guardians. I was not just a channel, I was a filter. I was sending pure, uncorrupted life force, and my will was holding it steady, preventing the taint from flowing back. The struggle was immense, monumental. It felt like I was tearing something ancient and profound out of the very fabric of reality. My muscles screamed, my head throbbed, and my vision swam at the edges. But I kept pouring the light, the life, the cleansing energy into the maw. Slowly, impossibly, the screams from the core began to subside. The internal darkness began to shrink, to recede, fighting desperately but losing ground to the relentless torrent of blue light. The sickening smell began to dissipate, replaced by a faint, crisp scent of pine and damp earth, a ghost of what the forest once was. And then, with a final, desperate gasp, the gaping maw of the core shuddered and collapsed. It didn't explode or vanish. It simply imploded, drawing its profound darkness back into itself, closing the wound it had created. Where the maw had been, the ground was now still, black, but no longer radiating malevolence. The blue light from the stones faded, leaving them warm and pulsing, but no longer blazing. A profound silence fell over the clearing, a silence deeper, more complete than any I had ever known. The whispers of despair were gone. The corruption guardians were gone. The pervasive feeling of dread had lifted, replaced by an immense, almost overwhelming sense of peace, of quiet, of profound restoration. I stood there trembling, utterly drained but whole. My body ached with an exhaustion that went to my very bones, but my spirit soared. I had cleansed it. I had healed the wound. From the surrounding forest, which still looked ravaged but now held a new, fragile quiet, the immense presences of the ancient guardians began to stir. Their blue eyes, once almost extinguished, now glowed with a soft, steady light, no longer fading but regaining their strength. The immense gnarled oak pulsed, and its voice resonated in my mind, no longer a groan, but a deep, resonant hum of ancient, satisfied roots and stirring boughs. The current it flows, the core it is pure, the corruption it is gone, you have healed, the balance is restored. Then the voice softened, becoming a melodic whisper of rustling leaves and flowing streams. The true guardian returns, your work is done here, for now. For now, always for now. As the ancient guardian spoke, a new light began to coalesce in the center of the clearing where the corrupted core had been. It wasn't the swirling blue of a portal, but a gentle, ethereal green glow, radiating a profound sense of peace and healing. From its depths, a new figure began to emerge. It was immense, even taller than the entities I had encountered before, its form woven from countless living tendrils of luminous green light, resembling ancient roots and intertwining branches. Its eyes, deep emerald green, pulsed with a benevolent ancient wisdom. This was the true guardian of this thin place, the living spirit of the old growth, returning to its rightful place. It was unlike any entity I had seen, a being of pure, verdant life force. It moved with a slow, majestic grace, its presence radiating warmth and life, banishing the last vestiges of the spiritual cold. It drifted to the center of the clearing where the core had been, and then, with an almost imperceptible motion, it settled, its root-like tendrils sinking into the black, scarred earth. As it settled, the ground beneath it began to shift, to soften. The black, oily sheen faded, and from the earth, tiny, vibrant green shoots began to emerge, pushing through the soil, reaching for the pale green light filtering through the canopy. The surrounding dying trees, though still ravaged, seemed to pulse with a renewed, albeit faint, vitality. The sickly purple fungi dimmed, receding into the background. The forest was beginning to heal. The true guardian turned its emerald eyes towards me, and its voice resonated in my mind, a chorus of rustling leaves, gentle wind, and the deep, contented thrum of the earth. The seed is planted. The wound is closed. The forest will live again. You are a true bridge, a healer of worlds. It then slowly raised one of its luminous, branch-like limbs and pointed, not at a portal, not at a distant place, but directly at me, at my chest. The power it grows, the path it widens. You are needed, always. My heart pounded with a mix of awe and trepidation. The power, it grows, the path, it widens. My touch was more than just perceiving or guiding. It was about healing, about actively mending the very fabric of reality. This was a deeper, more profound purpose than I could have imagined. The guardian lowered its arm, its emerald eyes fixed on me, radiating an immense, silent gratitude. It had nothing more to say, no new instructions. Its presence was enough. My task here was complete. But as before, there was no obvious way back. No shimmering portal had opened. I was alone in the quiet, healing forest, watched by an ancient, benevolent force. I looked down at the smooth, gray stones in my hand. They were warm, humming softly, a faint blue light pulsating deep within them. They had served their purpose, yet again becoming more a part of me, more imbued with the immense energies they had channeled. I tried to focus my touch again, not on the forest, but on my home, on the familiar energy of my apartment. It was harder now, with the profound, healing presence of the new guardian filling the air and the deep quiet that followed the expulsion of despair. But I reached, pushing my awareness outwards, searching for a familiar thread, a connection. After several minutes of intense concentration, a faint flicker. It was incredibly diffused, almost imperceptible, a distant echo of the portal's energy, but it was there, a subtle pull, a path back to the mundane. It wasn't a strong current like before, but a faint, almost intuitive nudge, as if my own touch was now strong enough to sense these subtle pathways without direct guidance. I began to walk, guided by the faint pull, moving slowly through the healing forest. The oppressive darkness had receded, replaced by a soft, pale green light. The whispers of despair were gone, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves, the soft drip of moisture from the canopy, and the distant, almost imperceptible chirping of forest creatures tentatively returning. The sickly sweet smell of decay was fading, giving way to the clean, crisp scent of pine and damp earth. The forest was still wounded, but it was alive. It was healing. And I, the ordinary hiker, had played a part in that ancient, impossible process. The path the pull indicated led me out of the deep woods towards what felt like the edge of the old growth. The trees gradually became less twisted, less ancient, though still immensely tall. The purple fungi disappeared, replaced by normal moss and ferns. The spiritual cold receded, leaving only the crisp, natural chill of an autumn day. Finally, through a break in the trees, I saw it, the faint gray ribbon of a paved road, and in the distance, the glint of sunlight on metal cars. I had walked out onto a normal highway, far from any familiar landmark, but definitely back in the human world. I stumbled out of the woods, blinking against the harsh, unfiltered sunlight. My jeans were torn, my jacket was dirty, and my face was streaked with grime and exhaustion. I must have looked like a wild person. A battered pickup truck rumbled past, its driver barely sparing me a glance. The mundane world, utterly oblivious, continued its endless churn. I looked back at the forest. It seemed to loom, dark and silent, revealing none of its secrets. But I knew what ancient, verdant spirit now resided in its heart, what immense forces had battled and healed there. And I knew that I was no longer just a visitor to these woods. I was connected. A shiver ran down my spine, not of fear, but of profound recognition. The for now warning echoed in my mind. This was not over. The entities were out there, the hunger would always return, and my touch, my purpose, was now irrevocably tied to the balance of these hidden worlds. I was a bridge, a healer, a guide, and the universe, I suspected, was only just beginning to reveal the true extent of its fractured, layered reality. My journey was far from over. It had only truly begun. I stood at the edge of the highway, the roar of passing cars a jarring symphony after the profound quiet of the healing forest. My clothes were caked with mud, my hair tangled with leaves, and a phantom ache still lingered in my bones from the monumental effort of cleansing the core. I must have looked utterly insane, a wild-eyed apparition stumbling out of the deep woods. But the drivers rushing past, their faces blank with the routine of their commutes, offered only fleeting, indifferent glances. They saw a vagrant, perhaps a hiker who'd lost their way. They saw nothing of the ancient spirits, the weeping trees, or the battle against despair that had just unfolded. The gray stones in my hand were cool now, their inner hum a gentle thrum against my palm. They were no longer blazing with blue light, but they felt profoundly connected to me, a constant whisper of the power I now wielded. My touch was a vast, open window onto the world, allowing me to perceive the subtle energies radiating from every living thing, every object. The trees at the forest's edge, though mundane, hummed with a quiet strength, their roots reaching deep into the soil. The rushing river nearby pulsed with a vibrant, flowing life force. Even the asphalt beneath my feet held a faint echo of the earth's pulse. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and utterly isolating. I took a deep, shuddering breath, filling my lungs with the exhaust fumes and pine scent of the ordinary world. I was here, back, but the here was forever changed. The world was no longer simply what I saw, it was what I felt, a vibrant, interconnected tapestry of visible and invisible threads. There was no bus stop, no convenient taxi. I was miles from any town, a mere speck on a rural highway. My cell phone, if it even had service, was likely dead, forgotten in the chaos. My only option was to walk. The sun climbed higher, warming my grimy face. The chill of the forest receded, replaced by the crisp, invigorating air of a beautiful autumn morning. As I walked, the faint, intuitive pull I had felt in the forest strengthened, a subtle thread guiding me. It wasn't the urgency of a portal, but a gentle draw, a current flowing towards human civilization. It was my way back, my touch adapting, becoming a compass to navigate the everyday world that was now intertwined with the extraordinary. Hours later, tired but strangely exhilarated, I reached a small, sleepy town. Its single main street was lined with quaint shops and a diner, its sign promising the best coffee west of the mountains. I was still a mess, drawing curious looks from the few locals, but I ignored them. My focus was on finding a way home, back to my apartment, back to the illusion of my old life. I found a small, dusty general store with a payphone outside, a relic from another era. My wallet was still miraculously in my pocket, along with some cash. I called Sarah. Her voice, when she answered, was filled with a mix of relief and barely contained exasperation. "Where are you? I've been calling your phone for days. I was about to call the police." Days, it had been days. Time, as always in the thin places, was a fluid concept. I mumbled something about a spontaneous hiking trip, getting lost, losing my phone. The lie felt flimsy, but she seemed to accept it, her relief overriding her suspicion. She promised to pick me up, her worry already returning to her voice. As I waited for her, sitting on a worn bench outside the store, I watched the town wake up. Children rode bikes down the street, their laughter bright and clear. An old man watered his petunias. A dog barked. My touch perceived the subtle energies, the bright, unfettered joy of the children, the quiet contentment of the old man, the simple loyalty of the dog. And beneath it all, the gentle hum of the earth, a deep, satisfied thrum that spoke of the forest's healing, of balance restored. It was a symphony of ordinary life, now perceived with an extraordinary clarity. Sarah arrived an hour later, her car pulling up with a screech of tires. Her eyes widened when she saw me, her expression a mix of shock and concern. "Oh my God," she breathed, rushing out to hug me. "You look like you wrestled a bear and lost." I just leaned into her embrace, the warmth of human connection, a stark contrast to the spiritual cold I had endured. It was a comfort, a lifeline back to the mundane. But even as she held me, I knew I could never truly explain where I'd been or what I had become. The gulf was too wide, the truth too impossible. The drive back to the city was quiet. I stared out the window, watching the landscape shift from rolling hills to suburban sprawl and finally to the towering concrete canyons of my home, my city. I could feel its vast, complex energy, the fragmented echoes of its past, the thrum of its present. It was alive, a living entity of stone and steel and human consciousness. Back in my apartment, I showered, washing away the grime of the forest. The hot water soothed my aching muscles, but it couldn't wash away the profound changes within me. I dressed in clean clothes, looking at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes held a new depth, a new wisdom, and a weariness that had settled deep into my soul. I was the same person, yet utterly transformed. I placed the gray stones carefully on my bedside table next to my alarm clock. They no longer felt like a foreign object, but an extension of myself, a physical manifestation of my touch. They were quiet now, their blue light dormant, but I could feel their presence, a steady internal resonance that mirrored my own. Sleep, when it came, was deep and restorative. The hum of the earth, the thrum of the city, the gentle whispers of the healed forest, they were all present, but now they were a comforting lullaby, a testament to the balance I had helped restore. I no longer woke in a panic, convinced I was still lost. My apartment was a refuge again, but now it was a base of operations, a place to gather strength before the next inevitable call. Days turned into weeks, then months. I resumed my job, my old routines, but everything was viewed through the new lens of my touch. I still struggled with the overwhelming sensory input, the constant awareness of the hidden layers of reality. Sometimes the mundane world felt translucent, its veil thin, and I could almost see the shimmering, thin places, the faint outlines of echoes, the subtle currents of energy that flowed beneath the surface. I continued my research, delving deeper into ancient myths, quantum entanglement, esoteric philosophy. I learned of other bridges, figures throughout history who had walked between worlds, mending, guiding, balancing. They were often misunderstood, revered as shamans, or condemned as madmen. I was not alone. This knowledge was a profound comfort. The entities, the guardians of the thin places, remained unseen, unheard. The portals didn't open. The hunger didn't scream. The silence was not unnerving now, but a welcome reprieve, a period of quiet integration and preparation. I knew they were out there, silent and watchful like immense, ancient sentinels, and I knew they would call again. My touch grew stronger, more refined. I learned to control it, to filter the overwhelming sensory input, like learning to tune out ambient noise. I could now choose what to perceive, what energies to focus on. I could sense the subtle imbalances, the nascent fractures in the fabric of reality, the quiet stirrings of the hunger long before it became a scream. I was no longer a passive recipient of their summons. I was an active participant, aware, watching, preparing. One ordinary spring afternoon, I found myself walking through a familiar city park. The sun was warm, the trees were bursting with new green leaves, and the air was filled with the sounds of laughter and the chirping of birds. My touch registered the vibrant life force of the park, the joyful energy of the children playing, the quiet contentment of the elderly couples on benches. It was a symphony of peace. Then a subtle shift, a faint tremor beneath the surface of the mundane. It wasn't a call, not a scream, but a whisper, a gentle thrum of imbalance radiating from a small, forgotten patch of wilderness at the edge of the park where gnarled trees bordered a stagnant pond. A thin place was beginning to awaken. A tiny fracture, a nascent hunger stirred. I stopped, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. There was no terror, no desperate plea. This was different. This was my awareness, my touch, discerning the need before any entity had to call. I reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around the smooth gray stones. They pulsed, a warm, resonant hum, mirroring the deep hum within me. The blue light, though invisible, was there, waiting. I looked at the park, at the people, at the vibrant, oblivious world. And then I looked towards the faint shimmer at the edge of the woods, towards the nascent, thin place. A profound sense of purpose washed over me, a quiet, unwavering resolve. This was my life now, this was my path. The for now would always hang in the air, a reminder of the unending nature of my task, but I was no longer lost. I was no longer trapped. I was not alone. I was the bridge, the healer, the guide. I was the anchor in the storm, the living current. I was part of something ancient, something far grander and more terrifying and more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. I walked towards the edge of the park, towards the nascent, thin place, towards the next small flicker of imbalance in the tapestry of worlds. The sun shone, the birds sang, and the ordinary world continued its oblivious churn. But I knew better. I knew the hidden depths, the silent battles, the ancient forces, and I was ready. My journey truly had just begun.